Chapter 3071. She was only wearing the blue heart demon armor now. Later, she would need to refine it. At that time, she would need a very quiet environment. Having a potential threat, like Su Yu, was really a big hidden danger. Where did you put Su Kai? Holy Pirate asked. She still couldn't forget Su Kai. Presumably, she had discovered the fact that Su Kai was born with the 8 great domains. If she could be cultivated properly, she would definitely be an existence that stood at the top in the future. Su Yu stood where he was and did not move. He said lightly, "For Su Kai-er's sake, I will advise you one last time to put down the blue heart demon armor. I stayed not to rob you of the blue heart demon armor, but to give you advice." Along the way, Holy Pirate was able to come here safely because of Su Yu's advice. However, at that time, Holy Pirate was not strong enough to listen to Su Yu's advice. Now, Holy Pirate was different. "Humph, you'd better take care of yourself first." Holy Pirate exerted strength on the tip of her foot. Suddenly, her whole body flew out like a spring, taking a step forward. Bang! With a muffled sound, she teleported to within 10 feet of Su Yu. Then, she clenched her fists and punched Su Yu fiercely. Su Yu did not dodge and shook his head regretfully. While Holy Pirate was puzzled, she suddenly felt a heart-wrenching pain in her abdomen, causing her fist to stop. She arched her body in pain, and cold sweat flowed from her forehead. "What would you do to me?" Su Yu stood where he was and said, "I didn't do anything to you, but the blue heart demon armor on your body." As he spoke, another heart-wrenching pain came from her neck. "What the hell did you do?" Holy Pirate covered her neck, her heart beating fast. However, Su Yu stood where he was and did not do anything. Suddenly, Holy Pirate groaned in pain again. Her legs seemed to be pierced by a sharp blade, causing a heart-wrenching pain. Now, she finally realized that it was not Su Yu's doing, but the blue heart demon armor itself. She immediately grabbed the collar of the blue heart demon armor and prepared to take it off. But now, she discovered that her neck, abdomen, and legs were connected to the blue heart demon armor. Even though she had the Yuan-Tian pearl, these 3 parts were still crystallized by the blue heart demon armor and became a part of it. That was why those 3 places were in extreme pain just now. "Priest Yuan-Tian, you lied to me." At this moment, Holy Pirate knew he had been tricked. Taoist Yuan-Tian had been deceiving her from the very beginning. How could it be so easy to inherit a legacy? As if in response to her words, a face with only a nose, eyes, and mouth slowly appeared on the surface of the blue heart demon armor. With a strange smile on his face, he opened his mouth and said, "Oh, he was finally reborn. Looks like I found a good body." His voice shocked Holy Pirate. The blue heart demon armor was alive. It was not a doctrine weapon. "You? Who are you?" Holy Pirate shouted with a sharp voice. He was extremely terrified. No matter how shrewd he was still shocked by the scene before him. The face on the blue heart devil armor smiled, even more strangely. "Who am I?" "I am Taoist Yuan-Tian. To be precise, it's a clone that Taoist Yuan-Tian left behind to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Even a cunning hare has 3 burrows. How could Taoist Yuan-Tian, who had been sealed here for countless years, not know this?" So, his true self escaped, but before he left behind a clone. If his true self died, the clone could continue to exist. Of course, the prerequisite was that the clone needed a living person to rely on. That was why he had asked Holy Pirate and the others to take over his legacy. However, Taoist Yuan-Tian's clone was different. His clone was not a body, but a layer of skin. The appearance of the skin was like a doctrine weapon, which was why Holy Pirate was fooled. "You." Holy Pirate was shocked and angry. With his shrewdness and countless experience in exploration, he had still been used by others. "Ha ha ha ha! Be a good boy and be my possession." The blue heart demon armor made an excited voice. "Since you can come in again, it means that there's a problem with the seal. I can leave the heavenly law prison again." Everything had been planned and calculated by him. For this day, he had waited 20 years for his body to return to him. He had waited until someone put the skin on their body and became one with it. Ah! Holy Pirate screamed. His chest was in great pain. The blue heart demon armor on his chest was attached to his body. When the attachment was complete, Holy Pirate would lose consciousness. His body would become Taoist Yuan Tian's inner body. No, don't even think about it. Holy Pirate growled and tried to get rid of the blue heart demon armor. However, most of his body had been integrated with the blue heart demon armor, and he could not get rid of it. After a few struggles, Holy Pirate fell into great despair. Suddenly, she saw Suyu standing silently in the distance. She said, "Kill me, kill me." She would rather die than let Taoist Yuan Tian succeed. Suyu stood motionless and did not make a move until Holy Pirate said something that made Suyu's heart beat faster. "If you still want to learn the space ancestral technique." Huh? Suyu's pupil shrank. The space ancestral technique? The cultivation of the soul ancestral technique could be said to have been obtained by chance and luck. Even so, he still risked being hunted down by the first ancestor. To learn the space ancestral technique of the other Saint clans was as difficult as ascending to heaven. At the critical moment, Suyu pulled out his sword. The absolute heaven sword rushed out of its scabbard, carrying with it the power to destroy heaven and earth. Like thunder, it pierced the space between Holy Pirate's eyebrows. The blue heart demon armor snorted coldly. "No one can stop my rebirth." Puff, puff. Countless tentacles shot out from the blue heart demon armor, piercing into Holy Pirate's limbs and bones, accelerating the control of his body. Before the absolute heaven sword pierced through, he controlled his arm, raised it, and blocked it between his eyebrows. Ding! The powerful sword pressed against the arm of the blue heart demon armor, creating a layer of blue air current rippling. The sword could not break through the toughness of the blue heart demon armor. Moreover, the air current that splashed out spread along the absolute heaven sword toward Suyu's wrist. At that moment, Holy Pirate relied on his strong willpower to control his arm to slowly move down a little bit, revealing the fatal weakness between his eyebrows. "Hurry up," Holy Pirate said through gritted teeth. It was obvious that she was struggling and could not hold on for much longer. The blue heart demon armor was furious. "Ugly woman, let go of me." The arms slowly lifted up again. In the struggle between the two sides, Suyu was decisive. He saw the opportunity, raised the tip of the sword, and instantly pierced the space between Holy Pirate's eyebrows. Under the unparalleled power of the absolute heaven sword, the body of Holy Pirate was torn apart and turned into smoke and dust. Only the blue heart demon armor was left. She lost her support and collapsed unwillingly. Lying on the ground, she was furious. "Stupid woman, it's fine if you die, but don't drag me down with you." Suyu stared at the blue heart demon armor. With a lift of the long sword, he put her back into the coffin. Then, he picked up the coffin lid and prepared to reseal it. Please remember the original domain name of this book, mobile version. Chapter 3072. As Suyu sealed the coffin lid, he said, "All right, speak." Blue Heart Demon Armor spoke quickly. "Let me out, and I'll listen to your orders from now on. With my strength, I can defend against most attacks in the world. Don't you want to have it?" "Of course I do." Outside the Heavenly Law Prison, there was a guy who was counting the days and waiting to take Suyu's head. With the defensive power of the Indigo Heart Devil armor, he might really be able to escape this calamity. However, Suyu didn't want to end up like the God Pirate. It was better to stay away from the incarnation left behind by the strong men of the All Saints. This time, the Holy Pirate relied on his strong willpower to barely control a little of his body and cooperate with Suyu to kill himself. If he was also controlled by it, who would kill him? "Are you done?" Suyu closed the coffin's lid, leaving only a slit open. Indigo Heart Demon Armor really became anxious and said, "Wait, I can tell you a secret about the human race's sacred body." Creak, the lid of the coffin was completely closed. Blue Heart Demon Armor was both shocked and furious. Saint physique of a human race, do you really want to be my Taoist Yuan Tian's enemy forever? However, in his moment of despair, the lid of the coffin opened again. "You can continue speaking." Suyu's face appeared outside the coffin. How could Blue Heart Devil Armor still dare to negotiate. He hurriedly said, "The growth method of the human race's sacred physique. I believe you should already know, right?" Suyu's expression did not change. "Okay, continue." "The only way for the human race's sacred physique to evolve was to obtain the Emperor's blood. Only by using the Emperor's blood to irrigate one's body could one advance further." Suyu had a first-rate holy physique, but he was still far from a perfect holy physique. It was not that Suyu was unwilling to train, but where could he find the blood of the Emperor? The Emperor's blood in his heart had already been extracted many times and had long since reached its limit. If it was extracted again, it would only cause his heart to fail and he would die. The Blue Heart Demon Armor said, "I know where the Emperor's blood is." Suyu's eyes were filled with lust. "Tell me about it." Blue Heart Devil Armor hesitated and said, "It's in the 3rd level of Heavenly Tao Prison. However, if you want to enter the 3rd level of the Heavenly Tao Prison, you will need someone to lead the way. It is not a place for people like you who have not even reached the ancient sage realm to enter. The 3rd level of the Heavenly Law Prison? If there really was the blood of the Emperor there, then he really did not come to the wrong place. Is the 3rd level of the Heavenly Law Prison very dangerous?" Suyu asked. Blue Heart Devil Armor countered, "The passageway to the 2nd floor is guarded by a 10,000 holiness level corpse. What makes you think that the 3rd floor won't be even more dangerous?" He said solemnly, "There is a pet of the Son of Heaven personally guarding that place. If no one cooperates with you, don't even think about entering." The Son of Heaven's incarnation. Suyu's eyes narrowed. "Pet? That's right, it was once one of Mirror Flower Heavenly Prince's pets. People call it the Chaos Holy Beast, and it can swallow a myriad saints expert with a single bite." Deep fear could be heard in Indigo Heart Demon Armor's voice. "Although I've been trapped in the coffin all these years, I've been constantly extending my perception outwards. Over the years, I've discovered many things. That pet is the holy beast guarding the 3rd level of the Heavenly Law Prison. It is extremely dangerous." Suyu pondered this for a long time, then lifted the lid of the coffin completely. He then took out a space storage artifact and said, "Go in." Indigo Heart Demon Armor immediately turned into a pool of blue liquid and drilled into the space storage artifact. He said, "Don't worry, as long as you let me out, you'll be rewarded handsomely." Suyu's heart moved. He wrapped the space domain with the 8 great domains. If Indigo Heart Demon Armor came out without permission, Suyu would detect it immediately. After putting away Indigo Heart Demon Armor, Suyu opened his palm. A speck of fluorescent light was dancing in his palm. It was the soul fragment of the god pirate after he died. He had seized the opportunity to grab it in his hand just now. "For the sake of Kai, Er's teaching, I will save you once." So you close his eyes. With the tyrannical secret technique of the soul, he used this trace of soul to duplicate the soul of the god pirate that had died. However, in the blink of an eye, a complete god pirate appeared in front of Suyu. The latter maintained the state she was in before she was killed. Her expression was one of extreme pain. Perhaps she felt the pain disappear quickly, so she opened her eyes in surprise. What she saw was Suyu standing in front of her, and she was safe and sound. "Am I not dead?" God Pirate asked blankly. Moreover, where had Indigo Heart Demon Armor gone? Suyu said lightly, "You did die once. Don't look for death again. Next time, no one will save you." When God Pirate put on the Indigo Heart Demon Armor, Suyu repeatedly reminded him to take it off immediately. Unfortunately, God Pirate did not listen and stubbornly sought his own death. From now on, Suyu would not save her again. "Did you save me?" God Pirate's mood was extremely complicated. For a moment, she even wanted to kill Suyu, but Suyu saved her. "Well, take care of yourself," Suyu said lightly. God Pirate bowed, then took a jade pendant from his body and handed it to Suyu with both hands. "This is the token of the Heaven Road. If one day you find yourself at a dead end, you can come to us with this token." Along the way, Suyu had heard God Pirate mention the Heaven Road many times. He, the Star Ocean Swordsman, the Sissy, and the others were all members of the Heaven Road. Suyu did not know what this organization was. He had never heard of it. After giving it to Suyu, God Pirate left alone. Suyu thought about it and casually threw the jade pendant into the heaven road. He did not know when the day would come, when he was at a dead end. It might be a few days later, or it might never come. After packing up everything, Suyu looked around at the second level of the Heavenly Law Prison, which was not huge, looking for the entrance to the third level of the Heavenly Law Prison. Master, your most loyal servant, Little Skeleton, is here. Little Skeleton ran out of nowhere, hugged Suyu's thigh, and cried, I got lost and didn't meet you. I was so scared along the way. Suyu had goosebumps all over his body. An old monster who had lived for several eras was acting like a spoiled child in front of him. Get lost. Suyu kicked him away and said, Where the hell did you go just now? The situation just now was a bit dangerous. When he wanted to use Little Skeleton, he did not appear. Where's God Pirate? Little Skeleton blinked his eyes and asked curiously. He did not know that the indigo heart demon armor had appeared here. He has left. Suyu's eyes flashed, and he said with some reservation. Little Skeleton was taken aback. No way. It was not easy to get to the second level of the Heavenly Law Prison, and he just left like that? Did he get his own legacy? Suyu stared at him. You have a lot of questions. His words were full of deep meaning. Suyu did not know if Little Skeleton was purely curious or if he was deliberately inquiring about it. He was 120% vigilant against this mysterious Little Skeleton. No more questions. Little Skeleton said quickly, Master, are you looking for the entrance to the third level of the Heavenly Law Prison? Suyu looked around. Where is it? As far as the eye could see, there was no entrance or exit. Please remember this book's original domain name. Mobile version. Chapter 3073. Divine 9 Dragon Cauldron, please take a day off, currently in the middle of typing. Please wait a moment. Once the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 3074. Suyu narrowed his eyes and looked around. It was far away, but close at hand. That meant, suddenly, Suyu looked at the coffin where Taoist Yuan Tian had been. He walked forward and saw a heavenly script at the bottom of the coffin. One of the incantations? Suyu looked around at the rest of the coffins, his face troubled. If this heavenly script was one of the incantations to open the third level of the Heavenly Law Prison, then it should be in the remaining 99 coffins. Did he have to open all the coffins and release the Heaven Masters sealed inside? Just thinking about it made Suyu shudder with fear. One blue hard demonic armor was enough to give Suyu a hard time, let alone the remaining 99. That's right. If you want to enter the third level of the Heavenly Law Prison, you have to collect all the incantations and summon the passageway with them, the Little Skeleton said with a smile. It had a strange smile on its face as it stared at Suyu, as if waiting for him to continue. Suyu looked at it and silently operated his soul eyes, trying to check out the situation in the other coffins. However, he was disappointed to find that because of the special chains, he could not see through any of the coffins. However, Suyu was not discouraged. He did not know the incantation, but someone else would. Taoist Yuan Tian, you know the incantation to open the secret room, don't you? Suyu transmitted his voice to the soul of the blue heart demonic armor. The latter said with certainty, Of course I do. Every era, an emperor will come down personally to check. All of us who are sealed know the incantation to open it. As it spoke, it told Suyu the rest of the incantation. Suyu silently memorized it and retracted his consciousness. Beg me. If you beg me, I will tell you the rest of the incantation, the Little Skeleton said with a faint smile when it saw that Suyu was helpless. It crossed its arms in front of its chest and said proudly, Without me, don't even think about opening the third level of the Heavenly Law Prison. Suyu stood calmly and said, What do you want? To remove the brand. He knew that this Little Skeleton was up to no good. Along the way, it had not been in a position to negotiate, so it had behaved itself. Now, it finally revealed its intentions. Hee, human, do you think your mark can do anything to me? Little Skeleton said disdainfully, If you don't believe me, you could try and see if you can control me. With the third layer of the heavenly path prison in front of him, Little Skeleton finally revealed his true nature. He said fiercely, "If it weren't for the fact that you have some skills and are of some value to me, do you think I would be willing to be branded by you?" As he spoke, a wisp of his soul separated from his body. This soul was less than 1% of his body, so even if it was destroyed, it wouldn't harm his body. Suyu was calm and unruffled. "And then? What do you want to discuss with me?" Little Skeleton retracted his soul and said smilingly, "This great sage is a very easygoing person. My request is very simple. First, give me your scythe and sword." Suyu nodded and said, "Go on." The little skeleton raised his head even higher. "The second and third levels of the heavenly Tao prison. I will go down first." With that, he shrugged. "Just 2 requests. How about it?" He stared at Suyu as if he already had Suyu in his grasp. Based on his observation along the way, he knew that Suyu was a smart person who knew how to choose. A person who had racked his brains to come to the third level of the heavenly path prison must have a reason to do so. Therefore, he must be willing to give up both the scythe and the sword. Suyu lowered his head and thought for a long time. Reluctantly, he took out the great scythe of 10,000 calamities and said, "All right, I will satisfy your request." Little Skeleton's eyes were filled with greed. He had seen the power of the great scythe of 10,000 calamities with his own eyes. Few weapons in the entire 9-star civilization could surpass it. He flew up and reached out to catch it. However, just as he was about to pounce on it, Suyu suddenly activated the great scythe of 10,000 calamities and slashed it hard on Little Skeleton's body. Ow, ow. Little Skeleton's body was indeed indestructible. He was not injured by the scythe, but was only sent flying. Before he could get up from the ground, he was pressed against the ground by Suyu with the scythe. Suyu's eyes were extremely cold. You don't want the spell anymore?" Little Skeleton asked. Suyu did not answer. With a shift of his mind, he detonated a mark that was branded in Little Skeleton's soul. "Ah, my soul!" Little Skeleton let out a shrill scream. The pain of having one soul annihilated was no small matter. Suyu said indifferently, "Do you still want my great scythe of 10,000 calamities?" Little Skeleton gritted his teeth and threatened, "Sue, I thought you were a smart person. I didn't expect you to be so muddle-headed. Do you think I will hand over the spell to you if you force me?" He sat up unhurriedly, fearless of Suyu's great scythe of 10,000 calamities. He said arrogantly, "Human, I advise you to think carefully before you act. Otherwise, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Suyu looked indifferent. "If you think the spell is your strongest weakness, then I can only say that you are overthinking it." He silently recited 50 words, each of which was the spell to open the third layer of the heavenly law prison. At first, Little Skeleton did not take it seriously. It was fine to know 1 or 2 words. However, when Suyu recited the spell later, not only were the words correct, but even the order was accurate. Little Skeleton felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He said in shock, "Impossible! How did you know?" Suyu did not say a word. He pinched Little Skeleton and threw him into the coffin. "There is an empty one for you." As he spoke, Suyu closed the coffin lid and wrapped the chain around it again. "Wait, you can't do this. I have worked hard even if I have not made any contributions, right?" Little Skeleton begged for mercy again. "Master, for the sake of my past, please spare me this time." Suyu said calmly, "Sorry, I am not your master. As you said, my methods of controlling people are useless against you." Sob sob. "Master, Little Skeleton was wrong." Little Skeleton said miserably, "Master is wise and mighty. Little Skeleton cannot escape from Master's palm." Suyu did not stop. He said, "You can say that to yourself." As the chain returned to its place, the seal began to take effect. Little Skeleton was really anxious. He said, "Suyu, do you know who I am?" Suyu clapped his hands and waved without looking back. "I don't know, and I don't want to know." From the beginning, he knew that Little Skeleton had an extraordinary background. It was not as simple as being a prisoner of the first layer of the heavenly law prison. How could a prisoner of the first layer be so familiar with the second and third layers? Moreover, little skeleton, who was afraid of the water of the yellow spring, could actually swim in it. Suyu would not believe that it was an ordinary person. Originally, Suyu did not intend to do anything to little skeleton if it did not make any further moves. However, since it had set its sights on the great sickle of 10,000 calamity and the absolute heaven sword, it could not blame Suyu for being merciless. Please remember this book's domain name. Mobile version. Chapter 3075. He raised his hand and was about to seal the coffin completely. The little skeleton was completely anxious. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I will do whatever you want me to do. At this moment, Suyu could no longer trust the little skeleton. It was better to let him be sealed in the coffin forever. But at that moment, the voice of the blue heart demon armor came. My lord, wait. Suyu responded calmly. What? Do you miss your coffin and want to go back and live there yourself? The words made the blue heart demon armor shudder, and he hurriedly said, No. You have other uses for this servant. Oh. Suyu's hand stopped, and he listened patiently to the blue heart demon armor. When the third level of the heavenly law prison opens, the passageway will appear, along with the emperor's pet guarding it. The blue heart demon armor said slowly, It is extremely powerful. My lord, you don't have to rely on luck to defeat it. Needless to say, Suyu understood. The corpse guarding the second level was already so powerful. The emperor's pet on the third level would definitely not be weak. However, although that pet is extremely powerful, it has a special hobby, and that is it likes beautiful things. I see that your servant is small and delicate, with a jade-like luster, quite beautiful. Why don't you try to cater to its taste and lure it away? When the little skeleton in the coffin heard this, his hair stood up in anger. Which old fart was it that tried to read your grandpa, great sage? Get out here? You want me, your grandfather, to curry favor with that sickly old demon? I won't go even if I die. Listening to the little skeleton's tone, it seemed to know what the third level's guardian pet was. Moreover, Suyu had never seen it so excited since he got it. You won't go even if you die, right? Well then, stay in the coffin. Suyu closed the coffin. The little skeleton hurriedly put on a long face. Master, you don't know what that old demon is like. She is so disgusting. If you fall into her hands, you will really wish you were dead. Suyu was getting more and more curious. What was the little skeleton, who was not afraid of anything, afraid of? Then I will give you two choices. First, living in the coffin is worse than death. Second, living in the hands of the old demon is worse than death, Suyu said. The little skeleton looked up to the sky and cried, Heavens, earth, just kill me. I don't want to choose either one. Suyu didn't have time to waste on it, so he fished it out of the coffin and threw it on the ground. Then, he started to silently recite an incantation. The 100-word incantation was slowly chanted, and the 100 coffins within a 100-mile radius shot out a dark red beam of light at the same time, reaching the sky. Under the illumination of the pillar of light, the center of the land surrounded by the 100 coffins was dyed red and gave off scorching heat waves. Gradually, a stream of scorching lava gushed out from the ground and melted through the earth. Along with it, there was a small amount of yellow spring water. Now he finally understood where the yellow spring's water came from. After that, the lava cooled down and a deep tunnel appeared before their eyes. That was the tunnel to the third level of the heavenly law prison. A gust of strong wind blew from the passageway. It was clearly a passageway that had just been melted by magma, so it should be extremely hot. However, at this moment, the wind blowing from the passageway was as gloomy as the 9 serenities of hell, making one shudder. Duh. Faint footsteps could be heard from the passageway, as well as a soft, bone-chilling roar. It was as if an extremely dangerous existence was slowly approaching. Under the illumination of the blood-red light, the second level of the heavenly law prison became deathly silent, and there was an unsettling pressure. Something was coming up. Suyu retreated slowly. He had an intuition that the thing coming up was 100 times more powerful than the ferocious corpse guarding the second level. He was keenly aware that the aura of the ferocious corpse on the second level had disappeared, The ferocious corpse had been guarding the entrance of the passageway, preventing Su Yu and the others from coming up again, so its aura had not dissipated. But now, he could not sense it at all. If the ferocious corpse, which had lost its rationality, could escape, the thing that was coming up was so powerful that it instinctively felt fear. "Hey, take me away, master. You really can't leave me here, I will die." The little skeleton protested loudly, its whole body trembling uncontrollably. Su Yu quietly flashed to the side, concealed all the aura on his body, and hid behind a coffin like a stone. In the silent heavenly law prison, only the sound of the little skeleton's teeth chattering in fear and the approaching footsteps could be heard. Closer. It was getting closer. He could already hear the light footsteps, as well as the indistinct clanking of iron chains. The little skeleton's eyes widened as it stared at the exit, its whole body trembling uncontrollably. "Stop playing around. No one can escape when it comes out. Let's go." "Ha!" A long exhalation came from the passageway. Su Yu squinted his eyes, staring at the exit without blinking. That thing was coming up. Thump! Suddenly, an old hand with long purple nails reached out from the passageway, without warning, grabbing the ground. Then, a second hand appeared. Then, an incomparably old head popped out. It was a skinny head without any flesh. Its eye sockets were sunken, and its cheekbones were bulging high. Around its bald head was a circle of gray hair. At first glance, it looked like a person who had been starving for thousands of years had crawled out of the ground. Although it was skinny, its body was exceptionally agile, and it quickly got up. It was not a demonic beast pet. It was clearly a person, but it was too skinny, like a skeleton. "Who opened the heavenly law prison door?" The skeleton looked around. When its gaze swept past the little skeleton, its lifeless eyes suddenly froze, bursting with an unprecedented glow. What a beautiful little skeleton! Whoosh! What caused Su Yu's pupils to dilate was that he did not see how the skinny elder moved. The other party had appeared in front of the little skeleton, and the little skeleton was already in his palm. Su Yu gasped. The other party's speed had surpassed the limits of time, reaching the stage of traversing time itself. Of course, Su Yu still maintained his rationality, quietly retreating into the passageway. The skinny elder did not notice him, and was carefully examining the little skeleton. The little skeleton was trembling in the skinny elder's palm, as if it had encountered something extremely terrifying. "Ayya! What a beautiful little skeleton! Look at its small buttocks, so round." The skinny elder revealed a sickly passion, extending his index finger and gently rubbing the little skeleton's round buttocks. As he rubbed it, he moaned in extreme pleasure. Oh, exquisite, exquisite small buttocks, it's so comfortable." The little skeleton lay on the ground, humiliated, and let out a desperate wail. "Damn old ghost, don't touch me." The dignified Ghost Clan's great emperor was, please remember this book's original domain name. Mobile version website. Chapter 3076. "Hey, you know me?" The skinny old man was surprised. He looked the little skeleton up and down with his bean-sized eyes. "You look familiar. Where have I seen you before?" The little skeleton was angry and scared. "You old fart. I'm Emperor Qing's mount. You old fart, let go of me." "Huh?" The skinny old man thought for a long time before he suddenly remembered. He said in surprise, "It's you? Didn't you escape during the cataclysm 20 years ago? Why are you back?" Su Yu was shocked when he heard this. The Emperor Qing mentioned by the skinny old man was undoubtedly a heaven master who had been imprisoned in the third level of the heavenly law prison. And the Ghost Clan Great Emperor, the prisoner of the first level of the heavenly law prison that he had accidentally saved, was the Mount of the Qing Arch. As he spoke, the skinny old man slapped the little skeleton's buttocks with uncertainty. "Ow!" The little skeleton let out a howl. Its jade-like body began to change, forming a lion-shaped skeleton. This was the little skeleton's original form, just like the skinny old man in front of him. "It's really you, Emperor Qing's mount, Ghost Firmament," the skinny old man said. "Oh my, this is incredible. It's really you." He touched the little skeleton's buttocks lustfully. You used to be the most handsome mount among the 7 emperors. Now you're finally in my hands." The little skeleton was humiliated. He gritted his teeth and said, "Old bastard, are you done touching me?" "Hiss, look at this buttocks that are a little fatter and a little less skinny. It's simply the work of the gods." The skinny old man kept stroking the buttocks in enjoyment. The little skeleton was trembling with humiliation. He thought of Suyu. All of this was thanks to him. If he hadn't imprisoned him here, would he have let this old bastard have his way? "Aren't you worried that someone will break into the 3rd level of the heavenly law prison when you are careless?" The little skeleton reminded him. In his heart, he thought, "Suyu, don't blame me for being ruthless. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself." He had deliberately exposed Suyu's existence in order to make Suyu's plan go to waste. Moreover, he wanted Suyu to suffer the same fate as Suyu. He wanted Suyu's buttocks to be ravaged by the old beast's demonic palms. The skinny old man didn't even turn his head. He closed his eyes and enjoyed himself. Isn't he just a human hiding in the dark and slowly moving toward the tunnel? If I still need you to remind me of this, then I'm a guardian beast for nothing. As soon as he said that, Suyu knew that he was in danger. He knew that he had been discovered. He no longer had any scruples and immediately used his space secret technique to enter the tunnel. However, just as he was about to activate his space secret technique, he suddenly noticed that the space around him had solidified, causing him to be unable to move forward, much less retreat. His entire body was frozen in this space. From the little skeleton's perspective, Suyu, who was in the midst of teleportation, was suddenly frozen, unable to move. The skinny old man grabbed the little skeleton with one hand and grasped the surrounding space with the other. Hue. Human, aren't you looking down on me way too much?" The skinny old man came in front of Suyu. His eyes lingered on Suyu's body and finally fell greedily on his buttocks. It's also of the highest quality, round and perky. Suyu's hair stood on end as he listened. This old guy didn't even let him go. Seeing that the other party was getting closer and closer, Suyu's heart moved, and he activated the time domain. The flow of time around him was instantly slowed down by 10,000 times, and he took the opportunity to get rid of the space blockade. However, as soon as he could move his hands and feet, the skinny old man, who had been slowed down, broke free from the shackles of time and took a step forward. His eyes were full of surprise. "You're proficient in both the time and space domains. TSK. Human, you are really not simple. You remind me of a person who has passed away in this era." As he spoke, he clenched his fist, and the space around Suyu solidified again. Only 4 of his hands could move, and the rest of his body was frozen. However, that person's buttocks are not as round as yours. The skinny old man's eyes were shining, and he swallowed his saliva. He reached out to touch Suyu's buttocks and said, "What good luck you have today to send me 2 of the highest quality." However, just as his palm was about to reach Suyu, the skinny old man's palm suddenly stopped, and he shifted his gaze to the other side. His eyes were cold. "Huh, this one is well hidden, and I almost missed it." He made a grabbing motion in the air, and a coffin near the passage suddenly flew up, revealing a pitch-black figure hidden behind the coffin. He was carefully crawling forward on the ground. Not only was his movement subtle, but he also did not have any soul aura. Even with Suyu's superb soul attainments, he did not notice his existence. Swoosh! After being discovered, the figure raised his hand and shot an arrow without hesitation. A pale bone arrow flew toward the skinny old man. The old man did not dodge, but calmly extended his finger and pointed at the tip of the bone arrow. Suyu was no stranger to this bone arrow. Previously, it had been shot by a sword, which had traversed through space and injured Suyu. However, in front of the old man, that incomparably powerful bone arrow was like a noodle. After coming into contact with the old man's finger, the bone arrow immediately melted into a pale white liquid, which dripped onto the ground and corroded it, creating holes in the ground. Great ferocious demon. The little skeleton recognized it and said, "It was the great ferocious demon, the leader of the 3 great ferocious demons in the 1st level of the heavenly law prison. The great ferocious demon was the first to give up hunting them, and he disappeared after arriving at the death swamp. Suyu had thought that he had given up, but he had been secretly following them all the way to the second level of the Heavenly Law prison. If the skinny old man had not sensed him in advance, he would have succeeded. The great ferocious demon reacted very quickly. After shooting an arrow, regardless of whether it was successful or not, he leaped toward the entrance of the passage. The skinny old man laughed. "You want to go in? Is that possible?" He once again displayed his nature-defying movement technique, which was not restricted by time, and arrived in front of the entrance in one step, blocking the way of the great ferocious demon. The great ferocious demon's expression was ferocious, but there was a sense of cunning in it. He shouted in a low voice, "Human, it seems like we need to join hands." The white liquid that had melted turned into numerous bone arrows, which shot through the space that had imprisoned Suyu. Walala! Suyu was finally free. He looked at the great ferocious demon on the other side of the river, while the skinny old man was sandwiched between him and the skinny old man. "Ha ha ha! Two mice trying to catch a cat." The skinny old man laughed loudly. He did not attack immediately, as if he had discovered something very interesting. Suyu snorted softly. Without hesitation, he took out the great sickle of 10,000 tribulations and activated it to the extreme, developing the 11th golden head. Destroy! With a wave of the great sickle of 10,000 tribulations, a formless wave swept out and attacked the skinny old man. The great ferocious demon also attacked immediately. He took out a small, delicate carriage made of white bones and threw it into the air. The carriage immediately turned into a magnificent army of thousands of horses and men, which charged forward with an imposing manner. Chapter 3077. Divine 9 Dragon Cauldron, please take a night off. Tomorrow, 2 chapters at noon. Currently in the middle of typing. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 3078. Boom! The two forces converged and collided with the skinny old man as the center. An unprecedented, violent collision occurred. Either one of them was powerful enough to kill an ordinary great saint. When they joined forces, they could wipe out all the strong enemies in the world. In the collision, the second level of the Heavenly Law prison shook violently. A large amount of dust fell from the upper space, and the ground made a crisp sound. Visible cracks appeared on the black ground. The sound of the explosion echoed in the air for a long time. Under such a collision, how many people in the world could stop it? However, when the boundless smoke and dust dissipated, the second level of the Heavenly Law prison became peaceful again. The skinny old man was unharmed. He was holding the little skeleton with one hand and the other hand behind his back. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even move, let alone fight back. Even so, the joint attack of Suyu and the great ferocious demon couldn't hurt him at all. In front of him, their attacks were like moths flying into a flame. However, both Suyu and the great ferocious demon rushed toward the entrance of the passage without waiting for the result. It turned out that they didn't expect to hurt the skinny old man at all. They just wanted to stop him from moving. Swoosh! Suyu and the great ferocious demon arrived at the same time and went into the passage together. The two of them instantly entered. However, the moment they entered, the two of them flew out at an even faster speed. They stood near the entrance of the passageway and looked at the entrance with a serious expression. A chuckle came from inside. "Two little kids, if you two escape in, where will I put my face?" It was the voice of the skinny old man. Turning around, the skinny old man who had just suffered an attack dissipated like a phantom. His movement technique had surpassed the flow of time. Any time Suyu and the great ferocious demon bought was useless. "Human, show me what you've got." The great ferocious demon shouted at Suyu from afar. His hands formed a seal, and countless white bone spikes appeared from his body. They covered his whole body and turned him into a giant hedgehog. At the same time, he squatted down and hit the ground with his hands. Sharp spikes as thick as a human's protruded from the ground in the passage, piercing through everything on the ground. If I remember correctly, This should be the consummate skill of the white-boned 10,000 saints, right? That guy and his entire tribe were killed by Emperor Xiaoyao, right? How could you leave an only child in this world? Moreover, after being imprisoned for so many years, he actually still has such a deep power of heavenly Tao. This is really surprising. Creak! The skinny old man walked out from the passageway and looked at the great ferocious demon in surprise. He stroked his beard and said, "Not bad, not bad. The buttocks are quite round. This old man has been lonely for so many years, but I didn't have a single companion to accompany me. Today, 3 have come. The heavens have pity on me." As the skinny old man spoke, he had already arrived in front of Su Yu and was about to wrap his arms around Su Yu's waist. "From now on, the 3 of you will accompany me and live a good life." Ha ha! Su Yu's eyes were indifferent. The chaotic energy and the holy body energy appeared in his body at the same time and condensed into a 2-colored airflow. Mortal and saint as one. Su Yu bellowed, holding the great scythe of 10,000 tribulations in his left hand and the ultimate heaven sword in his right. This was the first time the power of the fusion was used in 2 great killing weapons, and the effect was unexpectedly powerful. The 11th golden head of the great scythe of 10,000 tribulations seemed to have sensed something. Its half-closed eyes suddenly opened, and the hollow eyes released boundless deep black light. The endless ferocious energy of the ultimate heaven sword seemed to be stimulated. It wanted to break free from the suppression of the ghosts and release a towering sword energy. Time freeze. With him as the center, a domain of time swept in all directions. Within the domain of time, there is a faint trace of the primordial force, which doubled the freezing effect. Even someone as strong as the skinny old man was frozen for a moment. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Su Yu launched a pincer attack with the scythe and the ultimate heaven sword in his left and right hands. Chi! A stream of purple blood shot up into the sky. It was the arms of the skinny old man. Under the pincer attack of the 2 extremely powerful forces, he was finally injured. 2 bloody wounds that were so deep that the bones were visible. Purple blood shot up into the sky. At the same time, under the powerful impact, the skinny old man's whole body shook violently, and he was thrown a few miles away. This scene caused the little skeleton and the great ferocious demon to gasp. They never thought that Su Yu would have such a trump card hidden. After the attack, Su Yu rushed back into the passage without hesitation. At the same time, he added the domain of time acceleration to his body. The great ferocious demon also reacted and rushed back in. The skinny old man was unexpectedly injured, and he could not stop it for a while. When he rushed back into the passage, Su Yu and the great ferocious demon had completely rushed into the 3rd level of the heavenly law prison. They had succeeded. They had successfully passed through the protection of the skinny old man and entered the 3rd level of the heavenly law prison. If this news were to spread, no one would believe it. However, the little skeleton's eyes were lost, and he murmured, "It's over. They are completely finished." Looking over, the skinny old man's cheerful face had unknowingly become incomparably gloomy. His 2 eye sockets were also filled with biting cold killing intent. "I originally wanted to be merciful for once, but you guys didn't give me the chance." As he spoke, he stepped in the passage, and then stepped into the 3rd level of the heavenly law prison. He was not a ferocious corpse and could only guard the entrance. He could enter and exit any level. Swish! Su Yu's feet landed on the 3rd level of the heavenly law prison. Before he had time to look around, he felt a huge sucking force under his feet. He could not help but condense his chaotic energy and the power of his sacred body at the same time to stabilize his body from sinking. Looking down, Su Yu's pupils shrank. He saw that below the 3rd level of the heavenly law prison was not the ground, but a giant rotating eyeball. That eyeball gathered all the dark emotions in the world, including anger, curses, hatred, sadness, depression, insidiousness. The eyeball contained all the negative emotions of the living creatures. It was the countless negative emotions that condensed into a sucking force. pulling everything in the third level of the heavenly law prison into it. Looking at that eye, Suyu's blood was boiling. The countless injustices, losses, pain, and resentment he had experienced in the past all rushed into his mind, causing his eyes to turn red, and he lost his mind like a wild beast. Fortunately, a remnant of the ancestral technique of the soul suddenly appeared in front of his chest, and he instantly came to his senses. He hurriedly looked away, and his back was covered in cold sweat. Just one look had affected his emotions. The existence of this was too terrifying. He looked around, and the full picture of the third level of the heavenly law prison finally appeared in front of him. However, the moment he saw the full picture, Suyu's heart fell into unprecedented shock. He stood there absent-mindedly, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Mobile version website. Chapter 3079. Even when he learned that the ancient god Jiulong, whom he wanted to meet the most, actually regarded Zhang Wushuang as a successor, and that he, Suyu, was merely an accident and coincidence, he wasn't as shocked as he was now. That was because the third level of the heavenly Tao prison was in the shape of a moon. That shape was carved into Suyu's heart, and he would never forget it. That was the place that changed his life, the place where he met the love of his life. Mystic Moon Island. Everything began on Divine Moon Island. Suyu had once obtained the Divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron, and he had also met Qin Xiener and Xia Jingyu here. He had once soared into the sky and made a name for himself here. However, he never dreamed that he would see the Shenyue Island in the heavenly Tao prison set up by the Mirror Flower Heavenly Prince. Although Shenyue Island had shrunk by 10,000 times and was only 10 kilometers in circumference, it was still a small island. However, every blade of grass, every tree, every mountain, and every river was the Shenyue Island of the past. He felt as if he had fallen into a huge torrent, causing him to doubt everything. What kind of place was Mystic Moon Island? Was everything he experienced on the island a coincidence, or was someone manipulating it? While he was in a daze, an ancient voice echoed in the world. Who has come? That voice seemed to have come from the prehistoric times. It was faintly discernible and distant, yet it also seemed like the first sound that split the heavens and earth apart. It was deafening. So you woke up with a start. He looked toward the source of the sound, and his pupils shrank. In the sky, 7 black suns shone on the earth. They were motionless, silent for all eternity. Suyu activated his eyesight and finally saw clearly that in each of the black suns was a sleeping giant. From their bodies, Suyu could feel a familiar aura that was connected by blood. It was an ancient aura similar to that of the human ancestor. Looking at them, Suyu felt as if he was looking at an indomitable human ancestor who fought against the heavens alone. It couldn't be wrong. It was them, the 7 disciples who followed Rinzhu and attacked the sacred mountain. They had really been imprisoned in this era. Suyu folded his sleeves and bowed respectfully. Suyu, a descendant of the human race, pays my respects to the 7 disciples of the human ancestor. That was respect from the bottom of Suyu's heart. He had gone through all the hardships and dangers to come to the third level of the heavenly law prison just to see them. My descendant and a successor under the protection of my ancestor. The indistinct voice was clearly a little more excited. One of the 7 black suns emitted a faint red light, causing the dusky third level to be mixed with a trace of red. Finally, the red light in the black sun became even more obvious. As for the other 7 black suns, they all seemed to have awakened and released a wisp of red light. Furthermore, the red light grew stronger and stronger, causing the terrain of the Shenyue Island to be illuminated in a fiery red color, as if it was burning. My ancestor once said that his successor would come to find us. You have finally arrived. A deafening voice came from the other black sun. As long as our ancestor doesn't die, the human race won't perish. Waiting for an epoch hasn't been in vain. Rumble. Inside the 7 suns, the 7 giants slowly woke up. They stretched out their arms and legs, making the black suns as big as they could. Pairs of lofty eyes that looked down on the world opened in unison, as if they could destroy the world. Bang, bang, Heavenly Law Prison. The entire Heavenly Law Prison started to shake. The expression of the skinny old man who was descending changed dramatically. He stopped in his tracks and said in shock, "The 7 emperors are awake? How could this be? How could this be?" In the second layer of the Heavenly Law Prison, 100 coffins flew up at the same time, and each coffin released a huge, bright character of the Heavenly Law. They formed a huge, glittering net that sealed the land of the second layer of the Heavenly Law Prison. The shaking ground calmed down, but only lasted for a moment. The awakening power from the third layer smashed the giant net into pieces. The entire second layer immediately collapsed, and the hundreds of coffins were all shattered. The experts and almighties that were sealed inside broke out of their seclusion one after another. One of the almighties looked at the gradually collapsing Heavenly Law Prison in shock. What was going on? 20 years ago, a great emperor only woke up for a moment, and it caused the Heavenly Law Prison to shake, causing the outer seal to break, and giving countless prisoners a chance to escape. What is going on now? He was one of the fugitives that wanted to escape back then, but was caught and brought back. However, he clearly remembered that the disturbance back then was not even 1/10 of what it was now. Boom! With a loud explosion, the ground of the second layer of the Heavenly Law Prison started to collapse, and the passageway also collapsed quickly. Hurry up and leave. Amidst the loud roars, the many experts that had escaped started to escape. At the same time, the ferocious corpse that guarded the entrance of the second layer of the Heavenly Law Prison showed deep fear on its face. It let out a low roar and immediately escaped. In the Death Swamp, the 3 ferocious giant beasts were also scared out of the Death Swamp and escaped towards the outside world. In the distance, the crystal pillars could not bear the burden and exploded under the invisible power, and all the convicts escaped one after another. In the outside world, the seal that had not been repaired with great difficulty was now collapsing at a shocking speed. On the glazed seal, the leader of the stonemen was respectfully accompanying a 5-colored stoneman to inspect the status of the seal repair. This person was the representative sent by the Superior Stoneman Palace. His task was to inspect the status of the repair. "Sir, we have completed the repair of the seal according to the instructions," the leader of the stonemen said flatteringly. "We have completed the task according to the instructions of the Superior." The 5-colored stoneman squatted down and gently pressed on the glazed seal with his finger. The powerful seal, under the pressure of his finger, actually trembled slightly. The leader of the stonemen secretly gasped, his expression of respect becoming more and more obvious. To be able to use the power of a finger to shake the entire seal, only a strong person at the level of All Saints could do. There is a slight flaw. The 5-colored stoneman narrowed his eyes and looked around. His gaze then fixed on a corner. His figure flickered, leaving a trail of residual shadows. He teleported everyone away and appeared in front of an illusory spell that Suyu had left behind. The leader of the stonemen looked around but did not find anything. Just as he was at a loss, the 5-colored stoneman extended his finger and pointed at the illusory spell. There was a sudden huge fluctuation in the air, and a strange scene flashed by. The leader of the stonemen immediately understood, his face turning pale. Illusory spell? His heart trembled as he scolded. "What are you waiting for? Destroy the illusory spell." The stonemen behind him were all frightened, and they took out their doctrine artifacts to attack. The power of the illusory spell lay in its illusions. It did not have much defensive power, so it was easily destroyed, revealing the real scene inside. A small crack that had been left behind appeared in front of everyone. The leader of the stonemen felt a chill run down his spine. He knelt down in fear and said, "Sir, I have been negligent. Please punish me." If he had failed to complete such an important task as repairing the seal, the punishment that awaited him would be unimaginable. Please remember this book's original domain name, mobile version website. Chapter 3080. The Stone Man leader and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Then, They asked in surprise, "Sir, how do you know that an expert from the Soul Sacred tribe has come personally?" As far as he knew, the 7 ancestors of the Soul Sacred tribe rarely showed themselves. The 5-colored stone man looked at the broken illusion formation and said, "Without an extremely high level of soul ancestral technique, one would not be able to create such a profound illusion formation." His gaze fell on the crack, and he said, "Mend the crack. Since that person likes to go in, then don't come out again." Once the seal was repaired, no matter how powerful the other party was, he would not be able to come out of the heavenly Tao prison. Yes, the stone man leader immediately waved his hand, and a group of people prepared to mend the crack. This crack was very small, and it would take at most one day to mend it completely. However, at this moment, inside the heavenly Tao prison, under the translucent glass, flames shot into the sky, and an unimaginable impact rumbled up from below. Kacha-kacha, a large crack appeared on the 1,000-mile glass seal. Cracks as thick as a human spread at an alarming speed, spanning across the entire seal. Countless tiny cracks could be seen on its surface. What was even more terrifying was that the power that was leaking out did not diminish. Instead, it rushed out of the ground with an even stronger force, continuously widening the crack. In the end, the huge glazed seal shattered into pieces. In the first layer of the heavenly Tao prison, the prisoners sealed in the crystal pillars and the prisoners banished inside were all overjoyed and rushed out. In an instant, the sky was filled with howling bandits. They rushed out of the heavenly Tao prison in a dense crowd. On the seal, the stone men who had been thrown off their feet by the powerful impact had a drastic change in expression. The upheaval of the heavenly Tao prison was beyond their expectations. The 5-colored stone man was the only one who could remain standing amidst the tremors. His eyes were filled with intense, murderous intent. He raised his hand and pointed, and a pillar of light shot into the sky. The dark sky was immediately illuminated by this pillar of light, revealing the 1,000 sacred mountains silently floating in the sky. Countless stone men flew out from above. They were like a black cloud that sealed the sky of the heavenly Tao prison. Even a fly would not be able to escape. The 5-colored stone man said indifferently, "Kill them all. Leave no one alive." He glanced around and entered the heavenly law prison through the crack to see what was happening. The scene in the 3rd level of the heavenly Tao prison could only be described as earth-shattering. The 2nd level of the heavenly law prison above their heads had completely collapsed. Countless collapsed ruins fell into the giant eye beneath Su Yu's feet and were devoured by it. The extreme ferocious demon, who had been hiding in the passageway and paying attention to the situation below, fell down in a sorry state. Then it looked at the 7 suns above in shock. How is this possible?" The grand ominous demon muttered. "To prevent their humanity from being devoured, didn't the 7 emperors fall into eternal slumber?" He remembered very clearly that 20 years ago, Heaven Xiaoyao had come personally to inquire about one of the emperors, Su Yu. In the end, he woke up an emperor and caused endless tremors, causing the heavenly law prison to shatter and countless prisoners to escape. But now, in the future of the Son of Heaven, just the appearance of the black-robed man had caused the 7 emperors to awaken together. Who was he? If he remembered correctly, the power of the sacred body and the power of primal chaos had also appeared. Su Yu stared at the map of Shunyue Island, which was becoming clearer and clearer under the blood-red light. His eyes were filled with confusion. "Can you tell me what is going on?" The appearance of Shunyue Island made him feel as if the past 200 years of his life had been arranged by someone. If that was the case, what was the point of everything? One of the emperors in the middle had dim yellow eyes that shone with a penetrating light. Even if you did not ask, we would still obey the orders of the human ancestor and tell you everything. "Do you remember how you came to Shunyue Island?" Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. He had thought about this question for a long time. The more he cultivated to the peak of the martial path, the more puzzled he became about how he came to Shunyue Island. Before he traveled to this world, he used to be an ordinary person on Earth. Then the plane crashed. His body died, but his soul did not perish. He came to Shinue Island in the body of a person named Suyu. Based on his current realm, a person's soul could not perish after death. Only the strong men of the heavenly law with profound cultivation could do that. It was impossible for an ordinary person to preserve his soul in a huge disaster like the plane crash. The only explanation was that his soul was protected by someone. "It seems like you do not remember," the emperor said slowly. "Let me help you recover your past memories." As he spoke, his dim yellow eyes shone with a sharp light, piercing into Suyu's eyes. Suddenly, Suyu felt the world spin. A burning scene appeared in front of him. A plane had crashed into the forest, surrounded by raging flames. All the passengers on the plane had died. Near the window, a young man in a suit had died, bleeding from all 7 of his orifices. Suyu's pupils shrank. That was him from his previous life. At this moment, he had no breath left. He could not be any more dead. Wisps of soul light were slowly being drawn into the boundless vastness. They were being absorbed by the heavenly law into the mysterious world of returning ruins. However, all of a sudden, a giant hand that could blot out the sun crossed the sky without any warning and swept away all of Suyu's soul light. The giant hand had deep veins, and it was filled with boundless heaviness and sorrow. Wisps of blood flowed from the palm. He recognized that hand. It belonged to the human ancestor. It was the human ancestor who had taken away Suyu's soul, which should have been annihilated. Then, the scene changed, and Suyu's soul was forcefully injected into the body of a person who had just died. That person was the current Suyu. Seeing this, Suyu finally understood everything. There was no such thing as a past life or a present life. There was only the human ancestor who had saved his life. Then, the scene continued to change. An ancient cauldron with 9 dragons on it crossed the sky and flew into the distance. Suyu, who was on the ground, was diligently cultivating in the forest as usual. Suyu remembered that he had been warned by Qin Fun's father and stimulated by Jiang Xueqing's severing of all ties with him. Judging from its trajectory, the giant cauldron should not have been flying towards Suyu. However, the human ancestor's invisible palm had forcibly changed the giant cauldron's trajectory. In the end, it fell towards Suyu and smashed into his soul. Suyu suddenly understood. The ancient god Jiolong had once said that he had chosen Zhan Wushuang, who was born to be his successor, not Suyu. However, someone had interfered and caused the divine 9-dragon cauldron to fall into Suyu's hands. That was not an accident. It was the human ancestor's intention. The scene ended there. When Suyu came back to his senses, he felt an indescribable sense of loss. Could it be that everything that I have experienced was arranged by the human ancestor? No, the emperor said slowly. The human ancestor only arranged for you to see the scene. He was powerless to arrange more. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version. Chapter 3081. There is only one part of his life where the beginning was artificially arranged. Everything that followed was real. This made him feel completely at ease. Why did the human ancestor choose me? Suyu asked. He did not think that he had been worthy of the human ancestor's attention in his previous life. In terms of ability, there were many heaven masters among the younger generations of the human race. Wouldn't he be able to use the legacy better if he gave it to them? Perhaps in the past 200 years, there had been another person who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the human ancestor. But the emperor said something that shocked Suyu. You are not the only one arranged by the human ancestor. What? Suyu was shocked. There was more than one successor like him. He did not feel indignant. Instead, he was excited and expectant. Could there be others like him in the boundless world, who had been entrusted by the human ancestor, who had been oppressed by the fates of the holy mountain? At that moment, he felt that he was no longer alone. Where are they? Suyu asked. The emperor sighed. In the dust of time. In other words, they had all died. Only Suyu had managed to reach this day. The road to the revival of the human race is as difficult as ascending to the heavens, the emperor said slowly. You are the only one who could reach this day. Suyu's expectations were dashed. But thinking about it carefully, how difficult was the path of martial arts? The difficulty of the path of martial arts could not even be described as the path of martial arts. It was a miracle that Suyu had reached this stage. Suyu asked with flagging interest, why did the human ancestor not choose the strongest humans of the present age? Although the human race had declined greatly, becoming the last of the 10,000 clans, there were still some decent fighters among the short ones who were much stronger than Suyu had been back then. That is because the limits of those fighters have been set. Even if the human ancestor's legacy were given to them, they would not be able to create a new generation of the human ancestor. Thus, the human ancestor had to choose a junior with unlimited potential from the countless humans. Suyu couldn't help but agree. Many of the older generation couldn't advance any further in their entire lives because they had exhausted their potential. Then what about the topography of Shenhue Island? Suyu continued to ask. The emperor replied, that is a mark left behind by Prince Xiaoyao. He looked at Suyu, his expression turning serious. Prince Xiaoyao already knows of the human ancestor's plan. Suyu, on the other hand, seemed very calm and composed. Then what? What was the difference between knowing and not knowing? He and Son of Heaven Xiaoyao had a life and death grudge. Even if he wasn't the inheritor of the human ancestor, Son of Heaven Xiaoyao still wanted to get rid of him. Then, of course, there's a risk of losing the human ancestor's inheritance. Inheritance of the human ancestor? Suyu shook his head blankly. The 7 emperors kept saying that Suyu was the human ancestor's successor, but up until now, he had only been saved by the human ancestor a few times and had only learned how to control the mortal life cauldron once. It couldn't really be considered an inheritance. The human ancestor left you an inheritance. The emperor's voice was loud and clear. You are here today to obtain the key to open the inheritance. Suyu was startled. The real legacy was still there? Within the 7 scarlet suns, the majestic figures all stood up straight, forcing the suns not to set. An emperor said, Xiaoyao, Son of Heaven, only knows that the human ancestor left behind an inheritance, but he doesn't know that the key to the inheritance has always been with us. Another emperor said, before the human ancestor ascended the holy mountain, he had already made preparations. He left a human ancestor seal on each of us. Only by combining the 7 seals can the inheritance be opened. At the same time, each of the 7 seals represents a human ancestral technique. How much you can comprehend from them is entirely up to you. The bodies of the 7 people all left. Bright red blood splattered everywhere. However, when the blood had flowed out, a pool of golden blood flowed out from within. The golden blood emitted a heavy aura that originated from a human ancestor. After it flowed out, each condensed into a fragment of a key. Then, 7 or 8 key fragments condensed into a complete key, falling from the sky. The great ferocious demon had been listening from aside. Hearing this, how could he not be tempted? His figure flashed, and he rushed over first, grabbing the golden key. In response, the 7 emperors were extremely indifferent, treating it like air. It was as if they were not worried that someone could snatch it away. Unfortunately, the great ferocious demon's attention was focused on the key, and he did not notice anything unusual. However, he was still quite vigilant. He did not touch it directly with his body. Instead, he took out a jade box and caught it. Jade was an extremely pure object, and it was difficult for anything to corrode it. However, when the golden key fell into the jade box, it actually melted the jade box. The great ferocious demon was shocked, and he immediately threw away the jade box in his hand. However, when the golden key melted through the bottom of the jade box, it still came into contact with the great ferocious demon's palm. A horrifying scene appeared. Even someone as powerful as him was instantly melted into water vapor the moment the golden key came into contact with him. Not even a speck of him was left behind. One of the emperors said indifferently, "Do other living beings dare to touch the human ancestor's legacy?" The human ancestor was a heaven-splitting great ancestor who could compete with the Saint Mountain's heavenly sons. It would be strange if his legacy was easily snatched away by other races. The golden key fell silently, finally landing in front of Suyu's chest. Suyu was startled. As he looked at the golden key, he did not feel any danger from it. Instead, he felt a sense of kinship with it. He reached out and grabbed the golden key. It did not cause any harm to him. Instead, it warmed Su Yu's body. After observing it for a while, Su Yu suddenly thought a question. Where is the human ancestor's legacy? There was only the key here, but where was the legacy? Where you came from? One of the emperors said indifferently. Where did he come from? Did he mean Earth? Su Yu was startled. Where was Earth? Where was it? He could not help but wonder what was Earth in the great beginning realm. There was no martial arts there. It was a weak civilization without martial arts. It was even more inferior than the Mecha civilization he had encountered before. Earth has a name. You may not have heard of it, but you should be familiar with it, one of the emperors said slowly. It is called the Zero Experimental Point. Su Yu was very familiar with the experimental point. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce used to have a warship called the 30 Experimental Point. He had been to the Mecha civilization, which was full of flying warships and hidden in the endless void storm, and it was the number 1 experimental point. In other words, Earth was the same as the Mecha civilization, a product of the St. Mountain's experiment? He was a little confused. 7 great emperors, may I ask, what is the significance of the existence of the experimental points? The 7 great emperors shook their heads. Only one of them said, I once heard the human ancestor mention it by accident. It is the method by which the St. Mountain survived after the Great Destruction. The 9-star civilization was destroyed again and again, and the current 9-star civilization would be the last. When the civilization was destroyed, all the creatures would lose their dependence. What would happen then? The St. Mountain's emperors had already given the answer. The martial path was extinct, and all the creatures had forgotten about it. They lived ordinary lives and spent their lives in mediocrity. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version. Chapter 3082. Su Yu's vision became clear, and he understood the significance of the test points that he had encountered in the past. It turned out that they were using the test points to observe which civilization was more suitable for the survival of the future creatures in the Great Destruction era. There was no doubt that the Earth model would be their best choice, because under this model, all creatures would lose their martial arts and would no longer be able to resist the rule of the Holy Mountain. The Holy Mountain wants to enslave all the living creatures of the 10,000 clans and turn them into dogs of the vast expanse. They will then transform into the true heavenly law and rule the world from then on, an emperor said leisurely. So, Su Yu, the heavy burden on the shoulders of the human ancestor will be handed over to you. Please go to Earth and retrieve the legacy that the human ancestor left there. Only when you obtain it will you be the real heir of the human ancestor. Su Yu was just a candidate for the legacy of the human ancestor, and he had yet to receive the real legacy. Su Yu's heart was filled with excitement. What would the legacy of the human ancestor be like? After obtaining it, what kind of earth-shattering change would his strength undergo? Would he be able to compete with the Holy Mountain's emperor? May I ask, where is the Earth? No, test point 0. Su Yu asked. The emperor in the middle said, It is at the end of the heavenly road. The heavenly road? Su Yu had heard from the conversation between the divine pirate and the galaxy swordsman that it seemed to be a mysterious organization. To set foot on the heavenly road, you must be qualified, the emperor said slowly. That qualification is to become the king of a race. Only a king can lead the human race on the heavenly road. King? There were many powerful people in the human race now, and it was easier said than done to become a king who led them. If you can't even be the king of the human race, you are not qualified to inherit the legacy of the human ancestor, an emperor warned. The legacy of the human ancestor will not be left to the human slaves. Su Yu looked solemn, cupped his fists, and said, Junior of the human race, remember this. After a pause, Su Yu said what was in his heart. If I inherit everything from the human ancestor, can I compete with the emperor? Yes. This time, the 7 emperors responded together. If you become the ancestor, you will receive all the power of the Zhengjing tribe, command the creatures of the world, and compete with the emperor. Hearing that, Su Yu was excited. As long as he obtained the legacy, he could stand at the top of the myriad races. This attraction was simply too great. At that time, as the new generation's ancestor, he would be able to destroy the sacred mountain, control the sinkhole, and revive his lover. Nothing would be a problem. The heavenly road, Earth. Suyu clenched his fists, and the world in front of him became clearer than ever. In the past, he had always been forced by the general trend, and under the pressure of the situation, he had continuously moved forward towards the future. Even though he harbored the dream of opening the sinkhole and rescuing Sienna, he had no direction. He only knew how to improve his strength. But now, he was like a lost lamb who had been pointed in the right direction. He wanted to step onto the heavenly road and obtain the human ancestors' inheritance. From then on, he wanted to control everything. Rumble, 7 bolts of black lightning shot out from the eyes under his feet and bombarded the 7 blood-colored suns in the sky. With a loud bang, the 7 monarchs bent down in pain. Their majestic bodies were entangled by a bolt of lightning. One of the monarchs in the middle roared, "We've been tricked." What was going on? Suyu looked at the eyes on the ground. At this moment, the eyes were smiling mockingly. At the same time, a hollow voice reverberated in the 3rd level of the Heavenly Law prison. 7 monarchs, you were too careless after all. You didn't expect me to set up an ambush for you here, did you? Hearing that voice, Suyu's eyes instantly became extremely cold. Prince Xiaoyao. It was him. The monarch's expression changed drastically, and he growled, "Suyu, run? Prince Xiaoyao is coming." 20 years ago, Prince Xiaoyao came here. He predicted that the descendants of the human ancestor would come here, so he left a trick in the eyes. When the 7 monarchs woke up, the trick would be activated. Suyu's heart tightened, and he immediately took out the absolute heaven sword, wanting to pull it out to save them. The king in the middle shook his head. His body was rapidly turning black. Don't waste your energy. The sun that binds us is a cage set by the great emperor himself. Apart from him, no one can break it, including the carefree son of heaven. Without giving Suyu a chance to speak, he quickly said, "I am Emperor Qing, the first disciple of the human ancestor. Now, in the name of the human ancestor's disciple, I order you to leave immediately and never come back." Suyu's heart trembled. "But you—" The Green Emperor squatted down again in pain and hugged himself tightly. His entire body turned black uncontrollably, and it was extremely difficult for him to even speak. "Suyu, remember, if you're strong enough one day, don't show any mercy." As he spoke, he suddenly opened his mouth, and a beam of light shot out from his mouth, shooting upwards. Everything along the way was pierced through. The 3rd and 2nd layers of barriers and the glaze seal of the 1st layer of the Heavenly Law prison were all shattered by the beam of light. The outermost layer of the seal was completely shattered. The black mass of stone men who were suppressing the prisoners were completely destroyed, leaving a large empty space. The eye on the ground suddenly shrank, and a cold and furious roar came. "Emperor Qing, you still had a trick up your sleeve?" When the 7 monarchs were captured, their powers were all sealed to prevent them from escaping. Unexpectedly, Emperor Qing's body had always contained a power that could break through the Heavenly Law prison. For many years, he had not used this power to escape, but had instead followed the will of the human ancestor and silently waited for the arrival of his descendants. He had used this power to give them a chance to escape and ascend to heaven. "Go quickly!" Emperor Qing roared, and the sound waves swept over, engulfing Suyu in one breath. Under the effect of the terrifying beam of light, Suyu's body was uncontrollably washed out of the Heavenly Law prison. At this moment, Suyu's heart trembled violently. Those were the disciples of the human ancestor that he had been longing to see. Like the human ancestor, they were willing to sacrifice themselves for the great cause of the human race and for the sake of thousands of lives. A stream of hot tears swirled in his eyes. His blood, which had been silent for many years, suddenly surged like the beating of a war drum. Rest assured, 7 ancestors, the descendant of a human race, Suyu, will not let you down. Suyu remembered the words that the human ancestor had once shouted. "As long as my ancestor is alive, the human race will not perish." The seven monarchs spoke in unison again, using their remaining strength to let out a roar that shook time and space. Wu. Ancestor. No. Death. Human. Clan. No. Destroy. The 8 sonorous words were like sharp swords that could destroy the imprisonment of the heavenly law, shaking the heavenly law prison that had bound them for an entire era. In the passageway, the pale old man was grabbing the little skeleton and quickly escaping from the collapsing heavenly law prison. Emperor Qing suddenly yelled, "Old Kylan, you betrayed the human ancestor and joined the holy mountain. Now, use your life as a slave to atone for your sins." As soon as he said this, the heavens and the earth shook, as if he had touched the law of the heavenly law. Please remember the original domain name of this book, mobile version website. Chapter 3083. The ancient voice that shook the past and present took form, condensing into a golden chain. Whoosh, with a flash of golden light. The golden chain passed through the air and appeared in front of the pale old man. The old man screamed in fear and threw away the little skeleton. He yelled, I didn't betray the human ancestor." However, the golden chain was filled with cold and merciless rules. It immediately pounced on the old man and wrapped him up. The surface of his body was burned by the golden chain, and smoke rose. The old man yelled, "Emperor, save me." At the critical moment, he yelled and spat out a purple bead. The bead emitted the pure power of chaos. Vaguely, a gloomy and pale face could be seen on the face of the bead. It was Emperor Xiaoyao. "Emperor Qing, you hit it well." Emperor Xiaoyao yelled. The golden chain that bound the old man immediately showed signs of decay. Emperor Qing, who was in the middle, continued to turn black. Even so, he was still majestic. "Ha ha! If I didn't hide it well, how could I have lured you here?" Emperor Xiaoyao's pupils shrank. He immediately realized that he had been tricked. Emperor Qing laughed. "I knew that you left this old qilin, a sacred bead that can project images. It contains 10 drops of your emperor's blood, right?" Emperor Xiaoyao's face darkened. "You want my emperor's blood?" It turned out that Emperor Qing wasn't interested in the old qilin. He was interested in forcing the old qilin to take out the sacred bead. You plotted against me. Why can't I plot against you? I will use your emperor's blood to upgrade to the divine body for the hope of the human race." Emperor Qing's eyes shot out 2 solid beams of light. The beams shot toward the sacred bead like arrows. Emperor Xiaoyao humphed coldly. He flew into the air with the sacred bead and released gloomy air currents. Qi, a sharp arrow shot over and shook the heavenly Tao prison to the point that it completely collapsed. Below, the old qilin, as powerful as he was shaken. He rolled on the ground and staggered. When he steadied himself, he found that his chest had been torn open and purple blood was gushing out. That was only the remaining power of the arrow. The real power was enough to turn him into ashes. However, the might of the arrow was still blocked by the black air current, causing it to be unable to break through the Saint Pearl. However, there was not only 1 arrow, but 2. Go! The Azure Supreme, the arch roared, and another sharp arrow shot out. It completely broke through the obstruction of the airflow and shot into the sphere. Puff! A string of rainbow-colored Emperor's blood spurted out from the ball. On the Saint Pearl, the face of Emperor Xiaoyao looked extremely furious. Qing Emperor. He had never imagined that the Qing Emperor had actually reserved a rather large amount of power and had only suddenly launched an attack today, causing a huge impact on his plan. According to the plan, this Saint Pearl was the key to the descent of his projection. With 10 drops of blood, he could quickly descend an incomparably powerful projection and quickly control the situation. Not only could he obtain the key released by the 7 emperors, but he could also capture the successor of the human ancestor who had come to accept the inheritance. In the end, because of the Azure Thearch's concealment, his projection could not successfully descend. Not only that, even his precious 10 drops of Emperor's blood had been taken away, becoming the key for the successor of the human ancestor to ascend to the divine body. Ha! The Qing Supreme, the Arch, laughed heartily. "When you sealed us back then, You never thought that this day would come." As he laughed wildly, he opened his mouth and shouted, and the 10 drops of Emperor's blood caught up to Suyu. His bright eyes were full of anticipation. "Suyu, go and create a tomorrow for our race." Swoosh! The 10 drops of Emperor's blood caught up to Suyu in an instant, and Suyu grabbed them. He looked back at the 7 tiny suns, and his heart was moved. The long-lost passion in his heart roared like a raging beast. The little skeleton, who was scattered on the ground, looked at the Qing Supreme the Arch, whose face was as black as ink. Its eyes were full of sorrow. It lay on the ground and bowed deeply. "Qing Supreme the Arch." The Qing Supreme the Arch looked at it and said, "Go and help Suyu as much as you can to fulfill our last wishes." "But, Qing Supreme the Arch," the little skeleton whimpered. "His departure might be an eternal farewell." The Qing Supreme the Arch looked at the sky and caught a glimpse of the flashing sky outside the heavenly law prison. The human ancestor once said that an imprisoned body could not stop the soaring of faith. I think I have done it. For the sake of the great cause of the human race, he compromised and was imprisoned for an era. Di Ting, I may be destroyed forever. The Qing Supreme Thearch's expression suddenly became painful. His face kept twitching, and his words began to stutter. It was as if something was fighting for control of his body. "Now, I will give my faith to you. You, take my faith and follow your new master." The Qing Supreme the Arch hugged his body in pain. Di Ting sobbed even harder. "Qing Supreme the Arch, go quickly." The Qing Supreme the Arch roared for the last time. His dim yellow eyes were gradually covered by a layer of evil blood. Di Ting bowed deeply. "Yes, Qing Supreme the Arch." After saying that, he looked back at the Qing Supreme the Arch 3 times with each step and jumped into the pillar of light. Before jumping in, the Qing Supreme the Arch said one last sentence. "Be sure to tell him, when we meet again, don't show any mercy." After saying that, the Qing Supreme the Arch let out a painful roar, and then his voice was silent in the endless darkness. Di Ting, with tears in his eyes, disappeared into the pillar of light. Finally, the old Kylan, who was bound by chains, also jumped into the end of the pillar of light when the heavenly law prison collapsed, disappearing with the pillar of light. In the outside world, the pillar of light that soared into the sky swept away the stone men. Suyu was rushed out by the pillar of light and appeared above the seal. The stone men around him were staring at the pillar of light and Suyu, who suddenly appeared in the pillar of light with horrified eyes. "What are you waiting for? Kill him!" The leader of the stone men shouted angrily. Just then, the pillar of light lost its source of power and quickly dimmed and dissipated. The stone men immediately swept over and rushed toward Suyu like a black tide. Suyu was grieving for the loss of the 7 supreme Thearchs. When he saw this, his eyes turned red. He held the great scythe of 10,000 tribulations in his left hand and grabbed the absolute heaven sword in his right hand. At the same time, his holy body and the power of chaos erupted. "Go to hell!" Boom! The 2 world-destroying divine weapons erupted with destructive power, emitting a terrible wave of destruction that swept away thousands of miles. The stone men and the escaped prisoners, without exception, were all within the range of destruction. Amidst the countless screams, the stone men and the vicious prisoners turned into dust one after another. When the aftermath was over, only a piece of scorched earth and a small number of surviving prisoners and stone men were left above the seal. Suyu gritted his teeth. He had the heart to kill the rest, but the continuous fierce battles in the heavenly law prison had consumed a lot of his energy, and he could no longer fight. He had to put away the 2 divine weapons and leave as soon as possible while there were no more stone men pouring out of the 10 Saint Mountains above his head. However, even though he wanted to leave, there was naturally someone who would not allow him to. Chapter 3084. Stop right there. The old Kylan stumbled out of the ruins. There were still a lot of golden chains on his body. Although the chains were much weaker than the face of Xiaoyao, son of heaven, they were still tightly wrapped around the old Kylan, greatly limiting his strength. Human sacred body, Don't even think about leaving. The old Kylan roared. However, his strength was now severely limited. His speed, which was almost breaking the rules of time, could not be used. At this moment, he was not even as fast as Suyu. He could only watch Suyu leave. Listen to me. The man who escaped is someone that Xiaoyao, son of heaven, must kill. Capture and kill him immediately. The old Kylan roared. The remaining stone men treated the old Qilin's words as air, and like defeated monkeys, they fled towards the outside. The old Kylan roared angrily. Are you deaf? A few stone men who were running away turned around and shouted. Who the hell are you? Why are you ordering us? The old Kylan was so angry that he puffed out his beard and glared. He straightened his chest, and a round bead floated out from his chest. Seeing this, the running stone men stopped and knelt down on one knee respectfully. Greetings, Emperor's spiritual pet. The round bead was none other than the identity token issued by Xiaoyao, son of heaven, to his pet. Catch up with that man immediately. No mistakes. However, no stone men dared to move after hearing the order. Who dared to chase after Suyu? Didn't they see that Suyu had killed almost all the stone men and bandits at the scene with a single blow? Not even their remains were left. You, a bunch of trash. The old Kylan's eyes darkened. Since you are all useless, there is no point in keeping you alive. A thick purple airflow appeared on the surface of his body, and the airflow condensed into a giant mouth. With a roar, it pounced forward and swallowed all the remaining stone men at the scene. In the purple airflow, the stone men all turned into a mass of dark, gray, chaotic energy and returned to the old Kylan's body. A shocking scene appeared. Under the effect of the weak chaotic force, the golden chain cracked and a slight crack appeared. The chaotic energy had an extremely strong restraining effect on the golden chain. The slight breaking of the chain caused the old Kylan to release a small part of his strength. However, even a small part of the old Kylan's terrifying strength was still extremely terrifying. Swoosh! The old Qilin had already rushed out in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a series of afterimages. Suyu sensed something, and when he turned his head to look, his gaze turned cold. He secretly held the golden key. This key was left behind by the human ancestor, and it contained a great power. In this world, apart from the human race, any other race that touched it would be destroyed. The old Qilin in front of him should be no exception. Old man, let's remove the chains first. Just as the old Kylan was about to catch up with Suyu, a mocking voice appeared above the old Kylan's head without any warning. A fiery red jade lion stomped on the old Qilin's head with its 4 hooves, causing the latter to fall from the sky. At the same time, it used the momentum to catch up with Suyu and squatted in front of him. Its eyes were filled with a complicated look as it said, "Human lad, you're lucky. Come on up." Suyu had heard Emperor Qing's last words. He leaped onto the jade lion without hesitation. The jade lion's legs gave a powerful kick, and it instantly disappeared without a trace. Its speed was several hundred times faster than his own. When the old Qilin stabilized its body again, Suyu was nowhere to be seen. "I can't believe you ran away." The old Qilin was extremely annoyed. What kind of existence was it to let these 2 little things escape? Shaking the golden chains on its body, the old Qilin said angrily, "Damn Emperor Qing. If he had not hidden his trump card, everything would have gone according to Emperor Xiaoyao's plan. He would have obtained the human ancestor's legacy key and killed the descendant of the human ancestor. Unfortunately, all his efforts were in vain. Looking at the collapsed ruins, the old Qilin returned to the ground and slowly removed the chains on its body. Deep underground, in the 3rd level of the Heavenly Law Prison. In the collapsed Heavenly Law Prison, a figure was jumping back and forth, struggling to reach the 3rd level of the Heavenly Law Prison. It was the 5-colored stone man who had entered before. Looking at the pathetic state of the Heavenly Law Prison, his face was extremely gloomy. As the person in charge of the Heavenly Law Prison, he really did not know how to explain such a serious situation to his superiors. Suddenly, he noticed the 7 black suns, and his eyes were filled with shock. Although he was the person in charge of the Heavenly Law Prison, he had never had the opportunity to come to the third level of the Heavenly Law Prison. Only the Emperor could come here. What are these? He looked at the 7 suns cautiously, instinctively feeling that something was wrong. He took a few steps back. Unexpectedly, as he retreated, he accidentally stepped on something and broke it. Looking back, he saw that it was the holy pearl that the old Qilin spat out, which contained the projection of Emperor Xiaoyao. The holy pearl had already been broken by Emperor Qing, but there was still a large piece scattered on the ground. At this moment, the old Qilin stepped on it and broke it. However, in this piece, there was actually a drop of Emperor Xiaoyao's blood that Emperor Qing had not discovered. This is the Emperor's blood? The pupils of the 5-colored stone man shrank. As a stone man, the Emperor's blood had a bloodline pressure on them. However, it also made them have a natural desire. If they could digest 1 drop, they could increase their level and become a higher-level stone man. He squatted down excitedly and grabbed the drop of Emperor's blood. However, just as he grabbed it, Emperor Xiaoyao's gloomy face appeared in the Emperor's blood. You came at the right time. After a cold snort, without giving the 5-colored stone man time to react, the Emperor's blood instantly drilled into the body of the 5-colored stone man. The latter's body trembled violently, and his eyes turned white. His vitality was quickly extinguished. At the same time, another cold and gloomy aura surged out of his body like an explosion. The body of the 5-colored stone man also wriggled violently, and a huge change occurred. In a breath, his body changed from head to toe. From the 5-colored stone man, he turned into an existence that had enveloped the great beginning realm for countless eras. Emperor Xiaoyao? He opened his gloomy eyes and was disappointed. Fortunately, I was smart enough to leave the 11th drop of blood. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have been able to deal with the situation here in time. In the end, he still successfully projected his projection here. Looking at the devastated ruins, he did not feel sorry for them. His eyes were only focused on the 7 black suns. Fortunately, I did gain something. Although he had lost the key to the legacy of the human ancestor, lost the opportunity to kill Su Yu, and even destroyed the Heavenly Law Prison. Nevertheless, he still gained something. After so many years, all of you have been successfully blackened. Emperor Xiaoyao snapped his fingers, and the black suns that had sealed the 7 emperors for an entire era all exploded on the spot. 7 majestic giants appeared. He actually released the 7 emperors. However, the 7 emperors did not have any hostility towards him. Instead, they closed their eyes and stood in front of him. End of this chapter. Chapter 3085. Wake up. The 7 disciples of a human ancestor. Emperor Xiaoyao opened his arms. A black mist of chaotic energy gushed out of his body and entered the nostrils of the 7 emperors. Then, they opened their eyes, including Emperor Qing. However, the difference was that their eyes were no longer the dim yellow of the imperial heaven and earth. Instead, they were black. In those black eyes, there was a mixture of anger, sorrow, resentment, and injustice. All the negative emotions that should be in the world were contained in those eyes. Finally, we succeeded, Emperor Xiaoyao said slowly. It was rumored that the 7 emperors had reached the state of immortality. Even the emperor could not kill them, so he could only imprison them in the Heavenly Law Prison. That was just a rumor. If the human ancestor could be killed, why couldn't his 7 disciples be killed? It was not that they could not be killed, but Emperor Xiaoyao did not want to. Instead of paying a huge price to destroy all of them, why not make use of them and transform them into 7 peerlessly powerful weapons of the human world? The huge eye on the ground gathered the negative emotions that the sacred mountain had collected from the countless beings of destroyed civilizations over the years. It contained the darkness of those beings before they died. After years of brewing in the holy mountain, the dark emotions had become a strong poison that could corrode people's hearts. After a long period of time, it could poison the soul, turn one's mind dark, and enslave them. The 7 emperors knew Emperor Xiaoyao's intention. So, not long after they were captured, they immediately fell into a coma. In this way, the dark emotions could not affect their souls. An era had passed, and they managed to hold on. Although the dark emotions still had a subtle influence on them, they did not completely control them, until Su Yu's arrival woke them up from their deep sleep. Then, they were immediately plotted against by Emperor Xiaoyao, who quickly turned them dark and enslaved them successfully. Emperor Xiaoyao raised his hand and grabbed. The giant eye embedded in the ground immediately shattered like a mirror, turning into 7 small fragments. With a flick of his finger, each fragment shot into the space between the eyebrows of one of the emperors and merged with them. In this way, they were completely controlled by the mirror fragments and indirectly enslaved by Emperor Xiaoyao. However, the speed of merging the fragments was quite slow. It seemed like it would take at least a year. A cold smile appeared on Prince Xiaoyao's gloomy face. Su Yu, oh Su Yu, you will realize that the strongest humans you have to defeat in order to become the king of humans are none other than the 7 former students of the human ancestor. Far away from the heavenly law prison, the exhausted little skeleton stopped and landed on a rock. Io, it's similar to me. So you jumped down from its back. As he quietly adjusted his breathing and recovered his strength, he cast a sidelong glance at the little skeleton, who had transformed into a lion, and asked, "Are you Emperor Qing's mount?" He had never expected that the skeleton he had randomly rescued in the first level of the Heavenly Tao prison would be the Azure Thearch's mount. The lion shook his furry head. "What? I'm so handsome and mighty. Don't I look like one?" So he was not in the mood to joke around. His mind was recalling the scene of him meeting the 7 emperors, and his heart was filled with emotions. He didn't go to the Heavenly Law prison for anything, nor did he have anyone to remind him. He just wanted to take a look at this place out of respect for the human ancestor. He did not expect that what awaited him would be the human ancestor's inheritance. Did the human ancestor predict that I would come to the Heavenly Law prison? So you muttered. The little skeleton panted, lying on the ground. How could the human ancestor be so powerful that he could predict what would happen in epoch later? He did not even know that the 7 emperors would be arrested. However, if the successor he chose did not even have the heart to search for his 7 former disciples, he would not have the right to inherit his inheritance. Hearing this, Su Yu suddenly understood. It turned out that this was also a test. It was a test of Su Yu's respect for the bloodline of the human ancestor. If he did not, he would never obtain the golden key to unlock the inheritance. After pausing for a moment, the lion said sadly, "Also, the Azure Tharch asked me to tell you not to show mercy when your abilities reach that level one day." Su Yu raised his eyebrows. The Azure Tharch himself had said the same thing to him. "What does that mean?" he asked, puzzled. The lion's eyes were filled with sadness, and it sobbed. "I will answer you when you become the human king. It is meaningless to tell you now." The Azure Tharch was telling Su Yu not to show mercy when he saw them in their dark forms in the future. He had to kill them. Su Yu did not pursue the matter. Instead, he looked at the lion and asked, "What should I call you?" The lion thought for a moment, then twisted its body and turned back into a jade skeleton. "Just call me Little Skeleton. I was a lion in my previous life, but I am a skeleton in this life." Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. Previous life and this life? Do you mean the previous life before you entered the world of returning ruins? At the level of the little skeleton's cultivation, there should not be any concept of previous life and this life. The little skeleton blinked its eyes, which were burning with ghostly flames. "What are you thinking about?" "What I mean is that I cultivated from a little lion to a little skeleton. During that time, I underwent a complete transformation. It can be said to be my previous life and this life." So he was greatly disappointed. It seemed like there were no shortcuts in the world of returning ruins. "Protect me." He closed his eyes and sped up the recovery of his body. Little did he know that after he closed his eyes, the little skeleton tilted its head and secretly glanced at Su Yu. Its ghostly flames were shining brightly. 2 days later, Su Yu opened his eyes abruptly. His gaze, which had materialized, was like 2 bolts of lightning striking the heavens, scattering the clouds for thousands of miles. After this trip, The power of the heavenly law in his body had become much purer, and it had reached the peak of the middle stage of the heavenly law master. It would soon be the first stage of the late stage of the heavenly law master, the ancient saint. Clap, clap. Right at that moment, the crisp sound of applause reached his ears. Looking sideways, Suyu was unperturbed. He frowned and said, "You are haunting me." At the riverside, not far away from them, a beautiful young girl was sitting by the river, her snow-white feet swaying in the water. She clapped her hands and said, "Not bad. You have improved. But don't forget the time. You still have 2 days left." Suyu's expression was calm as he replied calmly, "I thought you had died in the heavenly law prison. You are really lucky." Back then, the Qing Emperor's gaze had created a world-destroying wave. It was a pity that it had failed to harm the first ancestor of the Soul Saint clan. "If you're not dead, what about me?" The first ancestor looked pleased. The little skeleton, who was sleeping on the ground, suddenly overheard the conversation. Looking sideways, it was shocked. Hey, kid, you must tell me that you have no grudge against this lady." It seemed like the little skeleton knew her. Suyu said regretfully, "We do not have any grudge, but she will kill me in 2 days." The little skeleton's face became uglier than a pig's intestines. With a sullen face, he said, "Master, can't you take it easy with your tiny body? Why did you provoke all those old big shots?" When the first ancestor of the Soul Saint clan dominated the 9-star civilizations, the little skeleton was still in its mother's womb. End of this chapter. Chapter 3086. The little skeleton said with a sad face, "Why am I so unlucky?" He had finally escaped from the heavenly law prison, but now he had to follow a dying master. Suyu said calmly, "You don't have time to talk. You'd better hurry." He leaped onto little skeleton's back and surveyed his surroundings. Who in this vast world could be a match for an expert of the 10,000 Saints realm? After thinking about it, Suyu fixed his eyes on the road where he came from. "Sangtian Mountain, go!" Suyu's eyes lit up. There was only one person in this world who could save him: himself. If he tried to rely on others to save him, he would eventually die. The little skeleton transformed into a lion and immediately flew toward the Sangtian Mountain. It had been sealed for an era, so its strength was much weaker. Although it was rushing with all its strength, it couldn't recover to its previous state. Looking back, the first ancestor of the young girl was riding on a cloud, following him at a steady pace. She didn't try to distance herself from him at all. "Master, do you have any way to help me recover? If I can recover to my peak, I'm sure I can get rid of this *tch, the little skeleton said. "You?" Suyu didn't expect the little skeleton to be able to get rid of her. After all, even if the little skeleton recovered to its peak, it was only a great saint. The first ancestor was a living all saints. The gap between them was too big. "Master, don't look down on me. Since I was chosen as a mount by the Qing Emperor, I must be good at body techniques," the little skeleton said confidently. Suyu nodded secretly. Indeed, the Qing Emperor would never choose a mount based on appearance. Moreover, the little skeleton didn't have a single hair from head to toe. "Give me some time." Suyu closed his eyes again. The little skeleton had been weak for too long. It couldn't be recovered immediately by replenishing a bit of the strength of the heavenly law master. It would take more than 10 years to fully recover. However, Suyu was different from ordinary people. He had an ability that others didn't have, the 8 great domains, which had evolved a bit of the absolute beginning force. He sat with his legs crossed, and a giant emerald tree appeared behind him, emitting a hazy emerald light that enveloped the little skeleton. This was the recovery of injuries in the life domain. However, when the emerald light fell on the little skeleton, it passed through his body, leaving only a faint golden shimmer in his body to repair his dried body. A grave look appeared on Suyu's face. "I need half a day." The soul domain no longer had any effect on his body. Only the absolute beginning force could repair it. Half a day. The little skeleton was so shocked that his tongue almost fell off. He was just joking, and he really didn't expect Suyu to cure his body. The little skeleton was well aware of the state of his body. It wasn't something that could be recovered by ordinary energy. Even when the Lotus Arch woke up, he didn't help it recover its body. It was not that the Azure the Arch did not want to. It was just that he could not do it. Otherwise, he would not sit back and do nothing. How could Suyu accomplish something that even the Qing Emperor couldn't? It couldn't believe it at all. Suyu remained silent as he continued to instill the domain of life into the little skeleton's body. The power of the domain flowed out of the little skeleton's body, but the absolute beginning force remained. As time passed, more and more primordial force remained, nourishing the little skeleton's body. Little skeleton finally sensed the changes in his body. He could feel the energy of the Lord of the Tao accumulating in his body. His eyes were bursting with ecstasy and astonishment as he exclaimed, "It really works! Ha ha ha! I, the Fire Cloud Demonic Emperor, will soon return to the world." Little skeleton laughed heartily. The corners of Suyu's mouth twitched, and he almost woke up from his healing state. What? The Fire Cloud Demonic Emperor? He vaguely remembered that there was an existence called the Fire Cloud Demonic God back on Earth. So you look back. The first ancestor was following behind him at a moderate speed. When her eyes met Suyu's, she said calmly, "There are still 16 hours left. That will be the time for her to take Suyu's life." Suyu felt a chill in his heart. He did not dare to hesitate any longer. He immediately sped up and tried his best to heal the little skeleton. After the little skeleton's body had recovered part of it, he turned around and shouted fiercely, "Bitch, come and catch me." As he spoke, his limbs were suddenly surrounded by flames. As he ran, the flames burned through the space. It was almost as if he was running across space. His speed was several times faster than Suyu's space domain. The first ancestor, who was chasing after the little skeleton slowly, frowned slightly. Sky burning shadow. This is the top technique of the human race in the past, isn't it? A hint of seriousness appeared on her face. She quickened her pace and caught up with the little skeleton again. When she looked back, she secretly grinned. Damn it, this old woman is much stronger than she was back then. An era ago, her strength was still limited. Now, she had broken through to the point where she was not much weaker than Emperor Qing. If he wanted to escape from her hands, he would have to put in a lot of effort. After a few hours, Suyu's continuous infusion of the primordial force finally made the little skeleton fully recover. It took a deep breath, and its body rapidly expanded like a rubber ball, its whole body burning with raging flames. Let's try and catch up again. The little skeleton rolled on the spot, rolling in the void like a rubber ball. Wherever it passed, the space collapsed violently. Its speed was extraordinary, and it had reached more than 10 times that of Suyu's space domain. The first ancestor's beautiful eyes flashed, and a layer of pitch-black All-Saints power condensed on the surface of her body. Her movement technique had reached the extreme, but she still could not catch up with the little skeleton. The distance between the two of them was getting farther and farther. Noticing the scene behind him, Suyu breathed a sigh of relief and secretly marveled. This was indeed the mount of Emperor Qing. Although the way it ran was not very elegant, its speed through space was really beyond imagination. No matter how superior the first ancestor's strength was, she was no match for the little skeleton's movement technique. However, Suyu understood that he was not out of danger yet. The little skeleton's speed was indeed fast, but it could not run forever. There would come a day when its strength would be exhausted. As expected, half a day later, the little skeleton's speed had obviously dropped by 10%, and she was panting. "Master, I can't hold on any longer. Have we reached the Tsangtian mountain that you mentioned?" Suyu shook his head. There is still at least half of the journey. Based on the constantly decreasing speed, he might not be able to reach the Tsangtian mountain before the first ancestor caught up. And the time he had left was only 1 day. "Master, does the Tsangtian mountain have a way to deal with that old woman?" The little skeleton thought hard, but could not remember such a powerful place as the Tsangtian mountain in his memory. Could it be a place where new superpower had appeared in the previous era? "I'm not sure," Suyu said lightly. He was just guessing, but he was not sure. Then why did you go straight to the Tsangtian mountain? If you really got caught up, even the gods of the Great Luo would not be able to save you. the little skeleton said in surprise. Suyu shook his head. Apart from that, we have no other choice. Suddenly, Suyu's eyes swept down and caught a glimpse of a familiar area. His eyes lit up slightly. Maybe we can stop for a while. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Mobile version website. Chapter 3087. There was a blue lake there, which was embedded in the ground. Countless creatures were passing through it, and it was extremely busy. Not long ago, Suyu had narrowly escaped from this place. This was the Heavenly Law Alliance. Thanks to Elder Han, although Suyu had obtained the Heavenly Law prison mission, he had become enemies with the Heavenly Law Alliance, so he could no longer use the Yin-Yang Gate. Since I'm passing by, I'll take what I deserve. Suyu jumped into the lake and entered the Heavenly Law Alliance. The lake's barrier immediately sensed Suyu's powerful presence, and it sounded a green alarm. In an instant, the news spread throughout the entire Heavenly Law Alliance. Strangely, there were very few people in the Heavenly Law Alliance. There were only a few members with average cultivations left. The elders of the Hall of Elders were all strong martial artists, but they had all disappeared without a trace. All that was left was an empty Heavenly Law Alliance. Suyu's arrival had caused the members to flee in panic, without any power to retaliate. This was because Han Duanzu and the other elders had failed to kill Suyu. They had mistakenly thought that they were trying to kill Heaven Mirror Flower's clone, so they would be attacked by the Holy Mountain. Hence, they had all retreated. When Suyu arrived at the periphery of the Heavenly Law Alliance, there was a powerful formation that could not be seen with the naked eye. It had absorbed the energy of more than 10 eras, and its power could destroy the world. Back then, Suyu and the others had only managed to escape by relying on a gap that Bai Shui had pointed out. They had not dared to force their way through. What an ancient formation! It must be at least 10 years old. The little skeleton landed in front of the formation, its face filled with fear. The power of this formation is enough to make Emperor Qing suffer. After pausing for a moment, the little skeleton seemed to understand what Suyu was thinking. It shook its head and said, "However, if you think that you can use this formation to attack that old woman, I'm afraid you are thinking too much. As long as she is not stupid, she will not force her way through this ancient formation." Suyu's eyes lit up. Of course she is not stupid. She will not force her way through this formation, but I can use this formation to smash her. He clenched his fist, and 9 drops of Heaven Mirror Flower's blood appeared in his palm. How could I waste the 10 drops of Heaven Mirror Flower's blood that the Emperor Qing schemed for an entire era to obtain for me? Suyu stood in place, then pressed his palm against his forehead. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 9 drops of blood immediately entered Suyu's body, and his chest suddenly lit up. An oil lamp, which was emitting a faint light, could be faintly seen on his chest. That was the divine body oil lamp. The 9 drops of blood revolved around the oil lamp. They tried to leave the oil lamp, but they were bound by the great power of the oil lamp and could only revolve around it. Drop by drop, they were absorbed into the oil lamp. Sizzle. When a shred of blood was absorbed into the oil lamp, the weak flame of the lamp, which was about to be extinguished, suddenly grew by an inch, illuminating Suyu's chest even more clearly. His shadow, under the blossoming light, was magnified by a fold. As more and more blood essence was absorbed, the light grew brighter and brighter, and the shadow behind him grew larger and larger. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. After 3 drops, his figure had already grown 10 times larger, and it was still growing exponentially. A huge shadow enveloped the world. After 6 drops, his figure had been enlarged 1,000 times. After 9 drops, the light of the lamp was so dazzling that it was difficult to look at it directly. Strangely, Suyu's shadow was becoming clearer and clearer. The shadow was so huge that it covered half of the Heavenly Law realm. Its head was the size of the entire Heavenly Law Alliance. The huge shadow engulfed all the living creatures in the world. What was even more frightening was that the shadow contained a will of awakening. It was as if a being that had been sleeping for ages was slowly awakening. In the Heavenly Law realm, the blood of the living creatures who felt the awakening was boiling. The scattered humans felt an excitement that came from the depths of their souls. It was as if the human king, who had been silent for a long time, was about to awaken. The little skeleton was not surprised. He stared at the dazzling Su and murmured, "How long has it been since I last saw such a scene?" The last person to have a mature divine body was the human ancestor. Because of the era and their own circumstances, the 7 emperors had never broken through the shackles and become mature divine bodies. Now, the chosen successor of the human ancestor had finally reached this step. The 9 drops of Emperor's blood were all absorbed by the oil lamp. The latter slowly flew out from the top of Su Yu's head and hovered in the air. The oil lamp was no longer what it used to be. Its whole body was overflowing with spiritual light. The oil lamp was engraved with complicated patterns, and the light it emitted had an inexplicable energy that could expel all the darkness in the world and warm the earth. Under its illumination, the terrifying giant shadow that was suppressing the heavenly law realm did not dissipate. Instead, it became clearer. It had well-defined facial features, long black hair, a clean and majestic body, and a pair of eyes that were slowly opening. The left, I was a rotating star, and the right, I was an alternating sun and moon. It was as if those eyes were filled with the starry sky of the universe and could look down on the heavens. Huff! A long exhalation came from the mouth of the shadow. Part of the gas flew up to the 9 heavens and turned into stars and clouds. Another part fell to the earth and turned into mountains and spirit veins. The last part stayed on the earth and turned into billions of living creatures. This scene was very much like the scene of the primordial gas turning into all living things in the world. I have woken up. The giant shadow spoke and sat up slowly from the ground. For a moment, the earth of the heavenly law realm shook, and cracks appeared as if it could not bear its existence. When he stood up, the heavens above his head shook violently, and the boundless nebula receded, revealing a looming mountain above the nebula. The shadow stood behind Su Yu and gradually overlapped with Su Yu's shadow. Upon closer inspection, the silhouette of the giant shadow was exactly the same as Su Yu's. Su Yu raised his hand and grabbed it. The oil lamp that was once intangible was now solid, and Su Yu held it in his palm. "Is this the mature, human sacred body?" Su Yu murmured as he held the oil lamp. In the distance, the first ancestor finally caught up and stood outside the heavenly law realm. Her beautiful eyes narrowed as she stared unblinkingly at the indomitable shadow. "He also has the human sacred body?" There was finally a trace of surprise on the first ancestor's indifferent face. After a moment of silence, she stepped forward and chose to continue the chase. The ancestral techniques of the Soul Saint clan are not to be passed on to outsiders, even if you are the descendant of the human ancestor. The first ancestor was determined to kill. Even if Su Yu's human sacred body had matured, he was still no match for her. She had surpassed the ordinary realm and even surpassed the scope of living creatures. She was an existence that even the emperor had to be wary of. Su Yu was no match for her. At that moment, Su Yu looked over and said calmly, "You will pay the price for hunting me down." Chapter 3088. He grabbed the boundless barrier with his right hand, and a loud, earth-shattering sound reverberated throughout the starry sky. Within the borders of the Heavenly Law Alliance, countless members of the Heavenly Law Alliance who were fleeing looked up at the sky in horror. The barrier that had existed for more than a dozen epochs was actually separated from the earth and was lifted up by that unparalleled giant. It was as if the huge bowl-shaped net was nothing more than a fishing net in his hand. More importantly, the giant's palm contained a strong power of the holy body, so it did not directly touch the giant barrier net. Therefore, it did not hurt him at all. Right at that moment, the first ancestor finally arrived. She stopped before the giant net was lifted, and her pretty eyes narrowed slightly. A mature holy body is so powerful. The first ancestor exclaimed slightly. She had heard that there was a unique acquired body among the human race, which was called the human holy body. It did not originate from the bloodline, nor could it be cultivated in the later stages. It was born by gathering the faith of the human race. However, When the faith accumulated to a certain stage, it would produce the constitution of a holy body. However, since this era, many holy bodies have been born, but only a few people had awakened them, let alone cultivated them. Moreover, a mature holy body had not appeared since the human ancestor. Now, the little human she was chasing had cultivated to the level of a mature holy body. It was incredible. While she was pondering, he had already made his move. The boundless barrier in his hand was raised high, and he smashed it towards the first ancestor. The first ancestor's expression was slightly grave. She could see how terrifying the power accumulated in the barrier was. Even someone as strong as her could not face it head-on. Swish! Her figure flashed, and she was ready to dodge out of the attack range of the barrier at an extremely fast speed. At her level, it was almost impossible for difficult throws and hammer strikes to hurt her. This was because her movement technique was already so fast that it could surpass time. However, she did not expect that Su Yu was the one who could control time. Time set. The unparalleled figure opened his mouth and shouted fiercely. The time realm was shouted out from the mouth of the human holy body, and it had an irresistible, mysterious power. The Xing River, the earth, the grass, the trees, the mountains, everything was frozen in time. Wherever the voice passed, time would forcefully freeze. Under the effect of that strand of absolute beginning force, even the web-like barrier that had been passed down through the ages seemed to freeze. Caught off guard, the first ancestor's body was frozen in place. Although it was only for an instant, not even enough to blink, it was enough for an expert. Bang! The enormous energy barrier that had lasted for more than 10 great eras finally smashed fiercely into the ground, descending with Group 1 at the center. Chilla! Because of the fierce impact, a hole was torn open in the barrier. The incomparably terrifying energy inside was pouring out towards the first ancestor. However, just as the boundless destructive power was about to reach him, the first ancestor suddenly broke free from the frozen time and retreated madly. Pa! She reacted in time and avoided a large part of the energy impact, but she still couldn't avoid being attacked by the remaining energy around her. Lightning and sparks immediately erupted from her body, setting her body ablaze. She herself was blasted back 1,000,000 miles, crashing into all the mountains in her way. Finally, she crashed into the heavenly Tao realm boundary steel before finally stopping. The corners of her mouth were covered in blood, and her body emitted a charred smell. The high-grade Tao artifact she wore was either torn or burned. Even her exposed skin was burned. Her fine black hair was disheveled, and her fair face was covered in black smoke. The girl next door who had been as calm as ever was no longer there, and all that was left was an extremely sorry state. However, she was only a sorry state. She wasn't even seriously injured. Little Skeleton gritted his teeth and sighed. Sigh, just a little bit more. If this woman had broken free even half a breath later, she would have been seriously injured or even killed. But now, she was only slightly injured. What a pity. Now that the barrier's energy had been released, it would be extremely difficult to find another powerful force to destroy this old woman. Most importantly, they had successfully enraged this woman. They originally had one more day, but now, that might not be the case anymore. As expected, the first ancestor slowly raised her head, and a trace of murderous intent appeared in her smokeless and indifferent eyes. She slowly flew out of the sunken boundary steel, and from 1,000,000 miles away, she coldly said, "This attack will cancel out 1 day of your time. Now, the time you have left is 0. As soon as she said that, the first ancestor's body surged like a flood, and it was as if 10,000 beasts were roaring. It was as if a prehistoric torrent that could destroy the world was released from her body. Boom! Visible to the naked eye, a transparent liquid rushed out of her body, and with her, as the center, everything on the ground was destroyed as easily as crushing dry weeds. Mountains collapsed, rivers were sent flying, and even the plains were swept up into a 100-meter-deep crater. All living beings nearby didn't even have a chance to escape before they were turned into dust. Boundless waves of air surged for millions of miles, destroying everything in their path. As far as the eye could see, there was only desolation left on the vast land. And this was just the power she released from her body. She didn't use any techniques at all. This was a true 10,000 saint expert. Every move she made had the power to destroy the world. Are you ready? The first ancestor walked over slowly. It seemed like a step, but in fact it crossed countless spaces and came directly to Suyu. Unexpectedly, there was no fear on Suyu's face. Instead, it was full of calmness. Then, are you ready? Huh? The first ancestor frowned slightly. What did Suyu mean? Right at that moment, Suyu suddenly opened his mouth and shouted fiercely, "Prison drawing!" The unparalleled giant shadow behind him suddenly fell with a rumble, shrouding the land for millions of miles. The first ancestor hesitated for a moment, but she didn't retreat. It was just the shadow of the human clan's saint body, so there was nothing to fear. She raised her palm, and there was a majestic aura that could support the heavens and the earth. Rumble, the giant shadow suddenly collapsed and crashed down, but she easily blocked the chest of the shadow. The collapsing shadow didn't cause any harm to her. However, what slightly puzzled the first ancestor was that after the shadow touched the ground, it immediately dissipated into black words of the heavenly book. In addition, there were densely packed ancestral techniques. The first ancestor was surprised and puzzled. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed and focused on the collapsed fragments of the black shadow. There was an inconspicuous stone tablet the size of a palm. The stone tablet was extremely ancient, beyond the first ancestor's understanding. However, it was full of ancestral marks, which made her shudder with fear. It was as if she had seen the source of all things. Her terrible power, when it encountered the stone tablet, collapsed one after another. There are 2 more chapters in the evening. Also, Happy New Year! Please remember the original domain name of this book, mobile version website. Chapter 3089. How could this be? The first ancestor's beautiful eyes were filled with shock. What kind of power could suppress her cultivation, which she had cultivated for 7 or 8 eras? What on earth was that thing? However, while she was in shock, Suyu did not hesitate. The giant barrier that he had controlled the giant shadow to raise collapsed completely after losing the giant's grip. Although a large amount of energy had been lost before, there was still 1/10 of the energy left in the giant net-like barrier. Now that it had lost its support, all of the energy fell like a waterfall, pressing down on the first ancestor. The first ancestor's expression changed slightly, but all of her strength was suppressed by the energy emitted by the stone tablet, causing her to lose the ability to transcend time. She could only resist it with her strong body. At the critical moment, she opened her mouth, and a silver umbrella made of unknown materials flew out and quickly appeared above her head. Walala! The pouring rain fell on the silver umbrella, but it was all bounced off, not hurting the first ancestor directly. However, she did not feel good. The silver umbrella had indeed bounced off the energy rain, but the impact caused by the pouring energy was still transmitted through the silver umbrella to the first ancestor's palm. The umbrella in her hand kept sliding down, and a layer of the skin on the first ancestor's palm was rubbed off, causing blood to flow out. This did not stop. Suyu held the oil lamp with both hands, opened his mouth, and shouted, "Heaven-covering holy body!" However, the shattered fragments of the gigantic shadow actually fused back together and wrapped around the first ancestor along with the boundless energy that was pouring out. The energy that fell on the silver umbrella flowed through the giant shadow's body, then fell on the silver umbrella again. The cycle repeated, causing the first ancestor to fall into the huge impact again and again, unable to extricate herself. Seeing this, the little skeleton was dumbfounded. "Oh my God, I've really been trapped by you." It had originally thought that Suyu wanted to use the giant energy net to give the first ancestor a fierce blow. It did not expect that Suyu's real purpose was actually to trap her. Moreover, it was as if he could foresee the future. He calculated again, and finally succeeded in trapping her in the giant shadow. Suyu did not dare to stay any longer. He grabbed the returning ruins divine tablet, rode on the little skeleton, and immediately left. Hurry up. We can't delay her for long. That power could suppress the first ancestor, but the holy-bodied giant shadow he had conjured with the oil lamp was just a giant shadow. As time passed, the holy-bodied giant shadow's power would gradually dissipate until it could no longer maintain the giant shadow. At that time, first ancestor wouldn't be restricted and would definitely break free. 3 days at most. Suyu looked in the direction of the Tsangtia mountain. The little skeleton was reinvigorated. He gritted his teeth and said, 3 days are enough. It tried its best to carry Suyu through the endless starry sky, as if it was chasing after the stars and the moon. They passed by several caverns along the way, and finally arrived at the 10,000 Supremes cave after a day. On the second day, he arrived at the cloud-desolate territories Tsangtian mountain. Amidst the howling wind, Suyu finally returned to the stronghold that he had been away from for a long time. The cauldron's influence was developing in an orderly manner. You're back? The sinful lady was the first to sense Suyu's return, and she immediately went forward to welcome him along with Su Kai-er. Looking at Suyu's exhausted look, the sinful woman's heart was filled with bitterness. This time, he must have experienced some unknown dangers outside. Uncle, are you hurt? Su Kai-er went forward to ask with concern. Suyu jumped off the little skeleton and stroked her head with relief. He shook his head slightly and said, No, I'm fine. Is it good? The sinful woman felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. She felt that Suyu's life was too tiring. He was constantly on the move without rest. We're fine too. With the help of Aunt Sinful Lady, our cauldron has completely gained a foothold in the Tsangtian mountain. Most of the influences are willing to join our cauldron and become our vassal influences. Suyu was slightly surprised. Vassal? Before he left, he had only asked the Greenwood Saint clan to sign an alliance agreement with the Sacred Netherworld clan. What's going on? Suyu asked. The sinful woman smiled slightly and stroked her hair. She said, Actually, it's nothing. They figured it out on their own. Who would be willing to become someone else's vassal? Without a doubt, the sinful woman had used some unspeakable means to intimidate many influences. That was why they were finally willing to join the cauldron and become its vassal. You made the decision on your own. Suyu looked at the sinful woman. The sinful woman had been waiting for Suyu to praise her, but when he said this, her face stiffened. She lowered her head and said with a sad look in her eyes, I'm sorry. I made the decision on my own without your permission. Unexpectedly, Suyu walked over and patted her shoulder. But you didn't do anything wrong. After experiencing the incident in a heavenly law prison, Suyu already had a plan for his future. If he wanted to obtain the human ancestor's legacy and become the second human ancestor in the world, it was inevitable that he would have to climb the heavenly road. And the qualification to climb the heavenly road was to become the current human king. The human clan's orders were scattered all over the 9-star civilizations. If he wanted to become their human king, he would have to compete with the talents of the various regions. At that time, without his own influence, he would definitely not be able to fight alone. The cauldron had to have the foundation to dominate the 9-star civilizations. So, devouring the Tsangtia mountain was the first step. Even if the sinful woman had not taken action, he would have taken action. Hearing this, the disappointed sinful woman regained her vigor, and a faint blush appeared on her pretty face. In the future, you'd better discuss it with me. Do you understand? So you said softly. The sinful woman nodded her head weakly. Oh, I understand. I won't do it again. Suyu shook his head. What I mean is, you made the decision on your own. If you encounter danger, I will be worried. This was the reason why he reminded her. Not because he was worried that the sinful woman would mess things up. Worried about me? The sinful woman stammered, as if she could not believe that Suyu would be worried about her. For a moment, she felt like she was in a huge whirlpool of happiness, unable to extricate herself. By the way, which forces did not join the cauldron? Suyu asked. Since he had decided to use the Tsangtian mountain as a starting point, he had to firmly control this place. The sinful woman came back to her senses, took out a small booklet, and handed it to Su Yu. It recorded the hundreds of forces in the Sangtian Mountain, as well as those who had chosen to join the Cauldron and those who had refused to join. Su Yu quickly flipped through the booklet. Only 3 forces had refused to join. 2 of them were small and medium-sized forces, not worth mentioning. However, one of them made Su Yu's brows raise slightly. That Saint Clan member was none other than the puppet Saint Clan member. It was an extraordinarily stubborn Saint Clan member from the outside world. After obtaining Su Yu's ancestral technique, it had happily agreed to form an offensive and defensive alliance with the Cauldron. However, it had refused to become the Cauldron's vassal. Chapter 3090. The puppet saint race is truly despicable. After learning our techniques, they immediately turned hostile. Sukai, said angrily. Su Yu pondered for a moment, then said, I can't say that the puppet saint clan has fallen out with us. After all, the Cauldron's request to join them is really forcing us against our will. However, even the sinful girl spoke out with a slightly cold expression. No, they've really fallen out. Oh, Su Yu was surprised. Ow! The sinful lady said slowly. Ever since you left, the sacred puppet tribe announced that they would be in seclusion. So be it. The sacred puppet tribe doesn't meet outsiders all year round. Outsiders are used to it. But no one expected that ever since the sacred puppet clan went into seclusion, people from Sangtian Mountain disappeared one after another. Even people from our cauldron disappeared. Su Yu finally became serious, and he asked in a serious voice, Who disappeared? Mo Hung. The sinful girl slowly spat out 2 words, and her tone was filled with deep regret. Him? Su Yu was quite surprised. When did this happen? Why didn't you inform me? The sinful lady lowered her head in shame. You are carrying out an important mission outside. If we inform you, we will only make you worry for nothing. So, that's why you have to act on your own. So you had already guessed what would happen next. Sure enough, Su Kaier added, through the things that Mo Hung left behind, we tracked his whereabouts. He's in the sacred puppet tribe, but when we went to ask for him, the puppet ancestor turned hostile and sent his puppets to attack us, causing us heavy losses. She clenched her fists indignantly, anger written all over her little face. The sinful lady sighed softly and said, Actually, it wasn't our cauldron that suffered the greatest loss, but the sacred Netherworld clan. It turned out that all the forces had people missing, and many people had already suspected the sacred puppet clan, but there was no evidence. Coincidentally, the cauldron found out that Mo Hung had disappeared with the sacred puppet clan, and under the cauldron summon, they all came to the sacred puppet clan to demand an explanation. The puppet patriarch was still as rude and unreasonable as ever. After refusing to allow them to enter and inspect the puppet patriarch several times, he decisively commanded the puppet patriarch to attack them. The members of the sacred Nether clan were the first to bear the brunt of the attack, and they suffered the heaviest injuries. Their bodies were destroyed on the spot, and even their souls were heavily injured. They might perish soon. Su Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light. He really didn't expect such a drastic change to take place on the Sangtian Mountain after he left. It seems like the puppet ancestor has chosen to strike first to gain the upper hand, Su Yu said coldly. When he and Mo Hung had visited the sacred puppet race, they had seen a super puppet that the sacred puppet race had been building for several generations, a dangerous object forged from the remains of a 10,000 saints expert and made from blue hard iron. At that time, Su Yu had sensed that the puppet was extremely dangerous. Once it was successfully crafted, it would be earth-shattering and might even attract the attention of the Holy Mountain's heavenly sons. On the other hand, Mo Hung bluntly said that the puppet was most likely a living creature. As the #1 genius weapon refiner of a 9-star civilization, Mo Hung's intuition was very accurate. Therefore, Su Yu had once said that when the matter of the heavenly law prison was over, he would infiltrate the puppet saint clan personally and take the dangerous puppet away to prevent any future troubles. He hadn't expected that before he could take action, the sacred puppet tribe would sense it and capture Mo Hung first. If he guessed correctly, the puppet ancestor must have captured Mo Hung to do one thing: to refine a missing heart for that puppet. The puppet had been forged by the Abyss Puppet Clan for countless generations and had been perfectly refined. Now, it only lacked a qualified heart. And Mo Hung was one of the few people in the world who could refine this heart. Therefore, his capture must have something to do with the heart. The rest of the missing people were most likely related to the heart. What a sacred puppet tribe. Su Yu's eyes flickered with a cold light. Keep the stronghold well, and don't go out unless it's necessary. I'm going out for a while. Having just jumped down, he returned to the back of the little skeleton and rode it to the sacred Netherworld clan. At that moment, in the secret chamber of the sacred Netherworld clan, several strong ancient saints were surrounding an ancient bluestone slab. On it lay a vague soul. That was the Netherworld ancestor, who was so seriously injured that only a remnant of his soul was left. Beside him, the Greenwood ancestor was healing his injuries with his pure Greenwood clan realm, hoping to restore his soul. Greenwood ancestor, how is the situation? An ancient saint of the sacred Netherworld clan asked hopefully. The Greenwood ancestor shook his head and sighed. If the illness was in the body, my realm might have a miraculous effect. But the injury is in the soul, the most mysterious part of the human body. I can't do anything about it. Hearing that, several ancient saints couldn't help but turn pale. Some of them even became mournful. Greenwood ancestor, I beg you, you must save our ancestor. The Greenwood ancestor sighed and helped them up. Now, we are already members of the Cauldron, so we are bound together for good or bad. How can I leave it alone? But I have tried my best. The ancient saints were even sadder and at a loss. Greenwood, who came with them, sighed softly. If only the Cauldron Zune was here. With his ability, he might be able to cure the Netherworld ancestor. The Greenwood ancestor shook his head slightly. Even if the Cauldron Zune was here, I'm afraid he couldn't do anything about it. When it comes to the soul, no one can save it. Hearing that, everyone's expression became gloomy. But suddenly, the Greenwood ancestor raised his eyebrows and looked above his head. The others sensed it one after another and looked over. They saw a space crack appear above their heads, and a person fell from it. The Cauldron Zune, although the other party was in a black robe, who else could have the superb space realm other than the Cauldron Zune? Su Yu landed in the secret chamber and nodded to them casually. Then, he looked at the green stone platform, where the soul of the Netherworld ancestor was extremely weak. The latter sensed Su Yu's arrival and said weakly, The Cauldron Zune, the first time I called you that was when I was about to die. He reached out his hand and tried to grab Su Yu's sleeve. Su Yu patted the back of his hand and said, You will be fine. With Su Yu, who had the ancestral technique of soul, he would really be fine. However, this sentence was taken as a consolation to a dying person. The ancestral lord of the underworld shook his head slightly. His confused face revealed a trace of pleading light in his eyes. Although the sacred underworld tribe has never contributed anything to the Cauldron, please take into account that I have signed an alliance with the Cauldron Venerable. Please take care of my sacred underworld tribe, and don't let them decline so quickly. Okay? A sacred netherworld tribe had no new great saints, and the great saints of the older generation had fallen. The possibility of the sacred netherworld tribe falling was almost 100%. Without a strong person in charge, all the resources controlled by the sacred netherworld tribe would be snatched away in a short time. In that case, it would be more difficult for new great saints to be born, and the sacred netherworld tribe would gradually decline. His request was not to ensure that the sacred netherworld tribe would not decline, but to delay its decline. This was the only wish of the netherworld ancestor before his death. I'm very sorry for passing on the wrong chapter. It's my fault for not being careful enough. Reviewing. Chapter 30-91. No. Su Yu straightforwardly refused the dying request of the Netherworld Old Ancestor. The Netherworld Old Ancestor's face was filled with deep disappointment. He had thought that Su Yu would show him mercy and grant his dying wish before he died. He didn't expect Su Yu to refuse him so directly. The Greenwood Old Ancestor looked at Su Yu and couldn't help but feel disappointed. They had joined the Cauldron and become its vassal force. However, in the end, Su Yu didn't even agree to protect them. Even if he agreed, Su Yu didn't need to do anything special. He just needed to keep an eye on the members of the Cauldron and take care of them. Even so, Suyu still refused. He couldn't help but wonder if Suyu would also refuse him if he begged him one day. Was such a cauldron worth the unwavering loyalty of the Greenwood Saint clan? The answer was no. The ancient saints of the sacred Netherworld clan also felt disappointed. However, because of Suyu's presence, they all kept silent and didn't show it. The Netherworld Old Ancestor sighed slightly and said self-mockingly, "I've gone too far. Cauldron Master, just pretend I didn't say anything." Suyu nodded. "Well, your request is really too much. I can't do it." Hearing this, the rest of the people were even more disappointed and angry. If Suyu didn't agree, he wouldn't agree. Could he show some respect when talking to a dying man? Why'd he have to be so hurtful? However, Suyu's next words stunned everyone present. "You can't even die, but you want me to take care of your clan." "I really can't do it," Suyu said lightly. Hearing this, everyone present was stunned. What did he mean? The Netherworld Old Ancestor's already weak eyes suddenly opened wide. He said, "Cauldron Master, I know my own injuries." His soul was injured to such an extent, and he was only a moment away from death. Even the best elixirs in the world couldn't heal his injuries. The Greenwood Old Ancestor thought Suyu didn't understand the situation, so he said hurriedly, "Cauldron Master, the Netherworld Old Ancestor's soul has been greatly injured and can't be healed by any means." Suyu was expressionless. He said lightly, "How big of a world do you think you can't be healed by anyone in this world?" This, Forefather Greenwood was taken aback. The world he had seen was not small, right? He had been to most of the places in the Myriad Venerable's cave and even the Mirror Flower Heavenly Emperor realm. But this had nothing to do with healing soul injuries, right? Soul injuries were known to be troublesome, especially for Old Ancestor Netherworld, who had half of his soul destroyed. It was impossible to treat him. Without saying a word, Suyu drew a line in the air with 2 fingers, and a faintly discernible ancestral technique hovered above the Netherworld Old Ancestor's body. This is a soul ancestral technique," Ancestor Greenwood said with uncertainty. He could sense the tyrannical soul strength that filled the ancestral art. This was something that could only be emitted by a soul ancestral art. However, how could Suyu, a human, learn the ancestral technique of the Soul Saint clan? The Soul Sacred clan existed in this world, and it was the strongest sacred clan in the Mirror Flower Heaven's realm. There were many peerless old monsters among them, and any one of them could intimidate an entire region. Where did Suyu learn this from? What they didn't know was that not even the ancestors of the Sacred Soul race had successfully learned the complete ancestral soul method. Suyu pointed his finger, and the ancestral technique revolved. Wisps of soul fluorescence fell from the void. That is the soul fragment of the Netherworld Old Ancestor. This, Ancestor Greenwood's pupil shrank as he said in horror. Ever since the Netherworld Old Ancestor Netherworld was rescued, his soul had been disintegrating. Wisps of soul fragments disappeared into the void and disappeared. However, Suyu simply performed the ancestral soul technique and found all the lost soul fragments. Before long, the blurred half of the Netherworld Old Ancestor Netherworld soul body became clear again. However, the other half of his soul had been destroyed when it was attacked by the Puppet Saint clan. That was not something that could be recovered by the ancestral technique. Suyu withdrew the ancestral technique and placed his palm on the other half of the soul. Then he performed the secret soul technique that he had comprehended from the ancestral technique, duplication. Return the right body with the left way. A large soul domain spread out from his palm, and a scene that caused everyone present to suck in a breath of cold air appeared. The other half of the Netherworld Old Ancestor Netherworld soul was duplicated out of thin air. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. There was such a technique in this world that could heal soul injuries. After 10 minutes, the Netherworld Old Ancestor soul was restored to its peak state. He bounced up and looked at his complete soul as if he was dreaming. He had a surreal feeling. My soul has really recovered. Suyu withdrew his palm and took a light breath. This technique consumed a lot of the soul realm and energy. He could only save one person a day. He couldn't save more people. I will never forget Cauldron Master's life-saving grace. The Netherworld old ancestors' respect for Su Yu increased greatly. He was on the verge of death, but Su Yu had saved him. It was a kindness that could never be repaid. Su Yu said calmly, "Serve the cauldron wholeheartedly. That is the greatest repayment." The Netherworld old ancestor clenched his teeth and said decisively, "I apply to join the cauldron completely. From now on, there will be no sacred Netherworld tribe." Now, the sacred Netherworld tribe was just a vassal force of the cauldron. They could leave the cauldron at any time without any restrictions. However, once they joined, they would be a member of the cauldron and must be controlled by the cauldron. At the level of the sacred Netherworld tribe, it was usually impossible to abandon their own tribe and join another force. However, Su Yu's kindness was too great. This was the only way for the Netherworld old ancestor to repay him. Su Yu looked at the ancient saints of the sacred Netherworld tribe. Then you have to ask for their opinion. The sacred Netherworld tribe was the family of all the people of the Netherworld, not the Netherworld old ancestor alone. If they were unwilling, they might not be able to become a member of the cauldron. "We are willing," the ancient saints said immediately. Without Su Yu's help, the sacred Netherworld tribe would have lost their old ancestor and disappeared sooner or later. If they joined the cauldron now, they could still maintain the continuation and development of the sacred Netherworld tribe. Why not? Moreover, after seeing Su Yu's nature-defying means, who wouldn't fall for him? Following Su Yu was like having a source of immortality. As long as they performed well enough, Su Yu could use the ancestral soul technique to resurrect them. Why wouldn't they follow such a king? All the people of the Netherworld tribe present knelt on one knee and expressed their intention to join. The Greenwood old ancestor's mouth was dry. After struggling for a while in his mind, he bowed and said, "Cauldron Master, please give me some time to go back and consult with my people." He was also tempted. 10 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock, please remember this book's domain name. Mobile version. Chapter 3092. "It's up to you," Su Yu said casually. Su Yu asked casually, while his gaze became sharp, "Tell me in detail what happened after I left." The sinful lady and the others had only been established for a short time, so their sources of information were far less extensive than the Greenwood Saint clan and the Sacred Netherworld clan. They should be able to grasp more information. The Netherworld old ancestor answered immediately, "Cauldron Master, this is what happened." He told them all the information the Sacred Netherworld clan had. The result was similar to what the sinful lady had said, except for one important piece of information that the sinful lady did not know. There was once a mysterious young man who came to visit the Sacred Puppet Clan. The day after he left, strange things happened one after another on the Songtian Mountain until the crafting master, Mo Hung, was captured. The Sacred Puppet Clan's many conspiracies were completely exposed, which led to a war between the two sides. The Greenwood Saint ancestors said angrily, "The Sacred Puppet Clan ambushed us and caught the people who went to ask for it by surprise. We suffered heavy casualties and couldn't continue to fight the Sacred Puppet Clan." Even the two sacred clans had suffered such heavy losses, let alone the other great families. Their casualties would probably be even more tragic. The Netherworld old ancestor clenched his fists. "Cauldron Master, if we want to take revenge, we need to think about it carefully. Otherwise, if we go there now, we will only be courting death." They had too few strong men, and the giant puppet of the Sacred Puppet Clan was too powerful. Su Yu said calmly, "Think about it carefully? How long? 8 to 10 years or 100 years?" He didn't have that much time to wait. Not to mention that the first ancestor would catch up soon. He couldn't delay Mo Hang's capture. With Mo Hang's crafting skills, if he was threatened by the Sacred Puppet Clan, he would definitely be able to craft the heart of the puppet forged from the skeleton of the 10,000 saints. At that time, once the puppet was born, it would be invincible in the world. Su Yu and Mo Hung both had the same hunch that the puppet was an ominous thing and must not be allowed to be born successfully. But the Netherworld old ancestor said hesitantly, They were indeed in a disadvantageous position, and acting rashly was not a wise move. Suyu pressed down his palm and interrupted him. You don't have to come to the sacred puppet clan in person. You just need to mobilize our people and wait for an opportunity. Huh? Everyone understood what he meant. The Netherworld ancestor asked, What about you, Cauldron Venerable? Suyu's eyes flickered slightly. I will personally go to the Puppet Saint clan. Ancestor Greenwood and Ancestor Yuming were shocked. Cauldron Master, no. That giant puppet from the Puppet Saint clan is extraordinarily powerful. It must not be underestimated. Back then, when the Puppet Saint clan came to Santian Mountain, they rode the incomparably tall puppet and fought with the two patriarchs. In the end, the two patriarchs were defeated. Now that old ancestor Yuming was attacked by the puppet again and almost died. It was not hard to imagine how powerful the puppet was. You don't have to worry about that, Suyu said lightly. If I want to enter the Puppet Saint clan, it will be a piece of cake. Follow my instructions, gather everyone, and act according to the situation. Immediately, Suyu broke through the air and reappeared in the sky above the sacred Netherworld tribe, landing on the back of the little skeleton. Suyu pointed his finger, and the little skeleton flew away like the wind, bringing Suyu to the vicinity of the Puppet Saint clan. From a distance, the Puppet Saint clan was littered with corpses that had not been taken away in time. The ground was a mess, with rotting corpses and demonic beasts that had come to look for food. There was no one around, and it gave people an unusually savage feeling. It was hard to imagine that not long ago, this place was crowded with the Puppet Saint clan. In the territory of the Puppet Saint clan, a puppet's head was exposed, and its body was buried deep underground. At this time, there were many fully armed puppets patrolling the periphery of the Puppet Saint clan. It was almost impossible to break into the Puppet Saint clan without alerting anyone. In fact, it was difficult to even get close to it without alerting them. More importantly, the Puppet Saint clan was proficient in the forging of mechanisms, and this giant puppet was the residence of the Puppet Saint clan for countless years. It was more than just a few clansmen that were guarding it. The entrance was densely packed with traps, and it would be difficult to break in. Master, it is not easy to get in. That puppet is not simple. The little skeleton had followed Emperor Qing on expeditions from north to south and had seen a lot. He could tell at a glance that the puppet was extraordinary. Suyu's eyes were calm as he raised his palm. It is not difficult. In the palm of his hand, an hourglass slowly appeared. The domain of time was silently released from the palm of his hand, and it filled the surroundings. The patrolling puppets were frozen in time without warning. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Suyu came to the entrance of the Puppet Saint clan. However, he did not enter rashly. If he had guessed correctly, there were extremely dangerous traps waiting for him inside. He aimed at one of the clansmen, clapped his palm, and landed it on his shoulder. He used the soul substitution that Ling Hu Yang had practiced before and swapped his soul with that of this person. The little skeleton saw this and could not help but be surprised. This soul's secret technique is fun. Suyu, no, the Suyu who had entered the body of that clansman, turned around and looked at his own body, as well as the clansman's soul that had entered his body. Keep an eye on him. The little skeleton chuckled and slapped Suyu's body to the ground. Then, he covered Suyu's head and pinned it to the ground. The poor human had not figured out what was going on, and he was knocked unconscious by the slap. The veins on Suyu's forehead bulged. The little skeleton laughed dryly. I am sorry my hand slipped, and I hit him too hard. What did he mean by hitting him too hard? It was obvious that he was taking the opportunity to take revenge on Suyu for his abuse in the Heavenly Law prison. I will settle the score with you later. Suyu glared at him. When the little skeleton carried Suyu's body away, he raised his hand and waved. The time freeze in the sky dissipated. The patrolling clansmen did not notice anything unusual at all and continued to patrol. Suyu walked to the entrance and said, I will go in and report. Lord Fu Jun, didn't you just report? A patroller asked in surprise. Suyu glanced at him. Can't you report it again? The patroller shrank his neck. Although he was puzzled, he did not ask again. Suyu came to the entrance. He had mastered part of the patrolling leader's memory. He took out the golden token from his chest skillfully and touched it to the mouth of the puppet at the entrance. Creak! The giant door opened to reveal a crack that only one person could pass through. After Suyu entered, he found that the mouth was densely filled with round beads. The power of those round beads could be considered powerful, second only to the golden round beads that he had snatched from the little skeleton. If one of them exploded, it was enough to destroy a strong great saint. If all of them exploded, no one below the level of a 10,000 saint could survive. Suyu thought to himself, sure enough, there must be traps hidden in the puppet. If he barged in by force, he would not even know how he died. At 12 o'clock, the next chapter was updated. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version. Chapter 3093. As soon as Suyu entered, a red beam of light shot out from the mechanism on both sides, scanning Suyu from head to toe. Suyu suddenly felt that his body was being inspected from the inside out, and any abnormalities could be discovered by the red beam. Come in. After a while, the beam of light disappeared and was replaced by a hoarse voice. It seemed that he had successfully passed the inspection and his identity had been confirmed. Suyu quietly passed through the entrance and entered the interior of the Puppet Saint clan for the second time. As soon as he entered, a huge gear turned in front of him, revealing a hidden space behind the gear. An ancient sage-level Puppet Saint clan elder walked out from it. With his hands behind his back, he frowned and said, "What's the matter?" Suyu cupped his fists and said calmly, "My lord, how should we deal with the corpses outside?" He did not act rashly. This place was full of mechanisms, and all of them were controlled by people. If he made a careless move, the other party could trigger the mechanism. As for whether it would pose a threat to him, Suyu was not too worried. He was worried about alerting the enemy. "You should disturb me for such a trivial matter?" The ancient saint elder scolded and looked Suyu up and down. "What's wrong with you?" Suyu still maintained a respectful posture and said, "I think it's better to deal with those corpses properly, so as not to provoke more strong men of the Tsangtian Mountain." The ancient saint elder said disapprovingly, "What other strong men are there in the Tsangtian Mountain? Can't you count on the Cauldron Master? Not to mention that he has not returned yet. Even if he does, so what? He can't even enter the Puppet Saint clan." The ancient saint elder was quite confident in the defense of the Puppet Saint clan. Suyu slowly straightened up and said, "My lord, I can't agree with you." "Hey!" The ancient saint elder was really surprised. A small clan member dared to oppose him on the spot. Where did he get the courage to do so? No. As sharp as the ancient saint elder was, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. However, he couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. It was not until Suyu's words woke him up. "It's actually very easy for the Cauldron Master to come in." "Huh?" The ancient saint elder immediately stepped back and scolded, "Who are you?" Unfortunately, it was too late. Suyu took a step forward, patted his shoulder, and immediately performed the soul substitution technique. Suyu's soul quickly occupied the body of the ancient saint elder, while the latter's soul entered the body of the patrol leader. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at himself, standing in front of him, and shouted, "Guards! Guards!" However, there was no movement in the surroundings. The clansmen who were patrolling outside acted as if they were deaf and did not care at all until Suyu took out a six-sided die from his bosom. This was the core that controlled the nearby mechanisms. With a bit of activation, he isolated this place from the outside world. Even if he screamed himself hoarse, no one would care. "Who are you?" the elder of the ancient saint exclaimed in horror. Suyu shot him a chilling smile. "I am the one you thought couldn't get in." "What?" The ancient saint elder was taken aback. You're a Cauldron Venerable?" "Bingo." Suyu walked forward with a smile, and as the man looked at him with an unwilling gaze, Suyu slapped his head and knocked him out on the spot. After putting him into the space storage device, Suyu came to a large number of gears based on his previous memory. He activated the sieve, and the gears spun rapidly, revealing a passage that led straight to the giant puppet. He jumped down. Before he reached the bottom, he could feel the intense flames spitting out. It was the fire vein occupied by the Puppet Saint clan. And Mo Hung had come here to refine the seal once. However, Compared to the past, the intensity of the flames here was far stronger than before. Even Su Yu's newly matured saint body felt a little uncomfortable. He was almost sure that it had something to do with the extremely dangerous puppet. Dong! Su Yu was about to land when a voice came from the side to stop him. "Old guy, do you want to die? Is there a place you can go?" Looking sideways, he found that it was a strong, ancient saint hiding in the dark. He was here to prevent any unknown enemies from above from affecting the refinement of the puppets. Su Yu pretended to look solemn. "There's a big problem up there. I must inform the ancestor as soon as possible." "What?" The strong, ancient saint in the dark rushed out immediately. It was a short, red-faced man. Su Yu thought to himself that he could use the same trick to occupy his body and continue moving forward. He frowned and approached him with a solemn expression. He lowered his voice and said, "It's someone suspected to be the Cauldron Zune. He is attacking our stronghold outside." Hearing that it was Su Yu, the strong ancient saint's expression immediately became solemn. "Then we must inform the ancestor immediately." The ancient sage expert immediately made way for them. However, he suddenly realized something and stopped in his tracks. He shouted, "Something's wrong. You have never seen the Cauldron Zune. How do you know it's him who is attacking?" Seeing that he was about to be exposed, Su Yu raised his hands and slapped one of them on the top of his head and the other on the shoulder. All of a sudden, the soul exchange was completed. Su Yu entered the new body, and the short, ancient saint entered the abandoned body. What was even more tragic was that he wanted to shout out and alert the people around him. Unexpectedly, as soon as his soul entered the body, his palms suddenly slapped on the top of his head. With a miserable groan, he fainted on the spot. The corners of Su Yu's mouth twitched. He picked him up with the tip of his foot and threw him into the space storage device. Now, he only needed to use this person's body to enter the place where the puppet was being refined. Through the short memory stored in the body, Su Yu already knew that Mo Hung was outside the puppet, being forced to refine the heart, and he was about to succeed. However, at this moment, a strange change occurred. A wisp of silent fluctuation radiated in all directions. Su Yu suddenly noticed it and looked in the direction of the fluctuation. His face could not help but change. He saw that in the corner where the short ancient saint came from, there was a female ancient saint with a frightened face. In her hand, a jade scroll was crushed. His eyes reflected everything that had happened here. Su Yu came to his senses and made a prompt decision. He tore the space apart and chased after the woman. The latter's face was full of fear. As she ran, she shouted loudly, "Help! An unknown enemy has broken in." At this moment, next to the fire vein, the puppet saint was trying hard to beat a beating flame heart. In the heart, a flickering blue liquid was flowing. Su Yu was no stranger to this object. It was the precious blue heart iron. Its function was that once it was damaged, it would recover immediately. It was extremely magical. Next to the heart, Mo Hung was dripping with sweat as he added all kinds of precious materials into the heart. He was also instructing the puppet saint on the strength and frequency of the beating. Their heart was about to succeed. Moreover, it was a heart made of blue heart iron. In addition, the puppet's entire body was made of blue heart iron. Once it succeeded, it would be a peerless divine puppet that could not be destroyed in the world. Chapter 3094. Just as they were concentrating on forging the blue core iron heart, the female ancient saint ran over with a flustered look on her face. Panting, she said, "Something bad has happened. Something bad has happened." The puppet ancestor, who was forging the iron heart, had to stop. "What happened? Tell me quickly." The success of the blue core iron heart was imminent, and he had no time to care about such trivial matters. The female ancient saint said with a pale face, "Ancestor, the Cauldron Venerable has broken in." "What? Where is he?" the puppet ancestor asked. The puppet ancestor knew how powerful Su Yu was. After all, he was someone who could make Ancestor Ching Mu and the Netherworld Ancestor bow before him. The most troublesome thing was that Su Yu had broken in. If Su Yu was outside, it would be fine. With the powerful giant puppet, he was not afraid of Su Yu and could fight him. However, now that Su Yu had broken in, he was in trouble. He has taken over the body of ancient Saint Bayun. The female ancient saint said in shock. Taken over? The puppet ancestor was stunned. How? The ancient saint stammered, unable to say anything. She then said, It's probably Su Yu's soul that took over by Yungu's soul, then took control of his body and pretended to be one of us. He was still chasing after me just now. Is that so? The puppet ancestor was shocked. It was not unusual for someone to take over another's body. As long as one soul was strong enough, one could enter another's body and adapt to it. However, the premise was that it was just a soul without a body. If the soul existed in the body, no matter how strong the invading soul was, it would be impossible to take over the body by force. Moreover, ancient Saint Bayun's soul was very strong. It was even more impossible to take over his body directly. It's true, the female ancient saint said. She was on the verge of tears. If you don't believe me, take a look at this. As if in response to her words, a wave came from afar. It was the message that she had sent earlier. Somehow, the message had arrived later than her. The puppet ancestor took the message and pressed it against his forehead. He saw that the ancient saint guarding the entrance had forcibly taken over ancient Saint Bayun's soul. It's true, the puppet ancestor was shocked. At the same time, his expression turned solemn. Men, with a loud roar, several hidden ancient sages rushed out from the vicinity of the puppet. They were here to guard the heart that was on the verge of success, to prevent it from being stolen. But now, they had received an urgent summons from the puppet ancestor. Grand Ancestor, do you have any instructions? The ancient sages asked. The puppet ancestor said solemnly, All of you, immediately lead your people and seal off the surroundings. No one is allowed to enter. Remember, no one is allowed to enter, including our puppet Saint Tribe's people. Since Suyu could invade other people's bodies at will, he could appear in any unexpected clansman's body. Now was the most critical moment in the refinement of the blue core Ironheart. Nothing could go wrong. The female prime saint panted, But, are we just going to leave revered Cauldron here? Shouldn't they have gone to capture Suyu? The puppet ancestor said calmly, The ultimate goal of revered Cauldron's invasion should be our puppets and Mohong. As long as we protect them, everything will be fine. As for the clansmen who might encounter mishaps, we can only sacrifice them first. The female prime saint bit her red lips and said, Despicable! Wait until we succeed in refining the heart. We must make revered Cauldron pay the price in blood. The puppet ancestor said, Cut the crap. The refinement of the blue core Ironheart is about to be completed. Help me collect the heart. The female prime saint looked at the burning heart with anticipation, but she was also a little confused. How do I collect it? The puppet ancestor said nothing and threw her a special small cauldron filled with liquid mysterious ice to ensure that nothing would be missing after the refinement of the heart was completed. Okay, the female prime saint nodded. She looked around worriedly to make sure that her clansmen were guarding nearby and that Suyu would not come for a while. Only then did she feel slightly relieved. She held the small cauldron and waited for the moment when the blue core Ironheart was completed. The puppet ancestor's eyes focused on the blue core Ironheart again. Because of a distraction just now, the surface of the blue core Ironheart was fluctuating unsteadily. He hurriedly picked up the hammer and continued to forge. He urged Mohong, who had stopped, Hurry up, don't stop. Only then did Mohong reluctantly continue to add materials to it and guide the puppet ancestor on how to refine it. The puppet ancestor said as he hammered, Were you very excited just now? Did you think you were going to be saved? Mohong was silent. Ever since he was captured, Mohong had thought of countless ways to escape. Unfortunately, he had not succeeded once. After being tortured several times by the puppet ancestor, Mohong finally calmed down and started to refine the heart quietly. Humph! Don't even think about escaping. As long as the blue core Ironheart is not successfully refined, you can forget about leaving the puppet Saint Tribe, the puppet ancestor said harshly. Mohong gritted his teeth slightly and said, Puppet ancestor, I advise you one last time. Don't try to revive this puppet. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the consequences. In my opinion, this puppet is definitely not a good weapon. The puppet ancestor's eyes were burning with passion as he continued to hammer the blue core iron heart without stopping. The Abyss Puppet branch has spent countless years to refine this puppet. How can I give it up so easily? After pausing, a helpless and urgent expression appeared on his face. Also, we don't have time. Mo Heng's heart moved, and he asked, "Who was the young man who came to visit your puppet saint tribe that day?" Originally, everyone from the puppet saint tribe, from the ancient sages to the puppet ancestor, had held a trace of respect for him. However, ever since the mysterious youth had left, the puppet ancestor seemed to have become a completely different person. He desperately wanted to refine the puppet as soon as possible. The puppet ancestor was silent for a moment before muttering, "If we can't refine the puppet, the entire hidden sky mountain, cloud, desolate region, and myriad sovereign cave will be finished." "What?" Mo Heng asked casually and actually found out something incredible. He continued to ask, "Why? Why do you say that?" The puppet ancestor said in a low voice, "Don't ask so much. You just need to know that if the blue core iron heart is successfully refined, perhaps I could protect you and help you pass through this great calamity." What kind of calamity could destroy an entire cave? What was it that forced the puppet ancestor to refine the god of destruction puppet at all costs? He wanted to tell this news to Su Yu so that they could prepare in advance, but there was no chance. At this moment, the blue core iron heart suddenly emitted a clear breathing sound. Then, the heart started to beat rhythmically as if it was alive. Mo Heng's face fell. The scene that shouldn't have happened had finally happened. The heart was successfully refined. Chapter 3095. Seeing this, the puppet ancestor was overjoyed and laughed heartily. "Great! We finally succeeded. My Abyss Puppet Clan's countless years of painstaking effort is finally about to succeed." As long as this heart was placed in the puppet's chest, it would possess a certain level of consciousness and become the most powerful puppet in history. At that time, why would the Sacred Puppet Clan be limited to a tiny Sangtian mountain? The great changes that were about to occur in the future could also be safely weathered by the Sacred Puppet Clan. "Puppet Ancestor, think carefully," Mo Heng shouted with a deep frown. "The material you use to refine this puppet is not ordinary, but a complete corpse of a myriad saint expert." Do you know what a myriad saint expert means? That is an existence that transcends the realm of living beings and is second only to the sacred mountain Son of Heaven. Even a bone of a myriad saint expert is filled with danger after death, let alone a complete corpse. During the process of refining the heart, he had felt a great chill from the puppet more than once. His many years of refining experience told him that this puppet was absolutely ominous. The puppet ancestor chuckled coldly. "Mo Heng, do you think you're the only smart person in the world, and everyone else is a fool?" He took out a broken seal from his bosom and carefully stored it in a jade box. "Look at what this is." Through the jade box, he infused a strand of great saint power into it. Suddenly, a myriad of folded Buddha shadows appeared from the broken seal, chanting Sanskrit at the same time. Mo Heng only felt that his heart was empty, and all distracting thoughts were gone. Even the anxiety in his heart at this moment had vanished. "Do you see it?" The puppet ancestor said proudly. "This is the sacred Buddha rune that our Abyss Puppet Clan spent countless efforts to steal from the Gautama Buddha's ancient tomb. It has the unparalleled power to suppress evil beings. Otherwise, why would we dare to refine a complete myriad saint expert's body?" The puppet ancestor took out the rune and stuck it on the puppet's body. Strands of Buddhist power turned into holy Sanskrit characters that densely covered the puppet's entire body like a giant invisible net that restrained it. Mo Heng came to his senses, worry surging in his heart again. Even so, it's best not to give it a heart. The strength of a myriad saint expert is truly beyond your imagination. The famed Sword Sacred Clan that he once belonged to could be considered an extremely powerful sacred clan. There were few in the world that could rival them. However, There was once an unknown 10,000 saint powerhouse who had just passed by and scared the 5 great saints of the clan into a state of panic, fearing that he was coming for them. That kind of fear originated from the lowly beings looking up to the gods. At that level, myriad saint experts had already surpassed the limits of living beings and were no longer ordinary living beings. The Abyss puppet race might not know what a 10,000 saints expert meant. Humph! How stubborn. The puppet patriarch lost his patience. I've been talking to you for so long, but you're still going on and on. Since you don't believe me, then scram. Look after him. Ancient Sacred Drum nodded and immediately arrived in front of Mo Hung. She stared at him and raised the small cauldron at the same time, saying, "Old ancestor, it's ready. Release the heart." At this moment, the blue hard iron heart was still being refined. There were many seals on its surface. If the seals were undone, the heart might fly away on its own. Someone had to catch it. The puppet patriarch nodded as he gripped the 8 chains, sealing his heart with a greedy look in his eyes. Open. Crack. Under his great strength, the 8 chains broke one after another. The blue hard iron heart regained its freedom and flew away on its own. Catch it. The puppet patriarch shouted. Ancient Sacred Drum didn't dare to hesitate. She immediately threw out the small cauldron and prepared to catch the heart. However, just as the heart was about to be caught, Mo Hung suddenly chanted an incantation. The heart seemed to have sensed it and flew toward Mo Hung. He caught it first. It turned out that Mo Hung had added something to the heart during the refinement process, which allowed him to control it easily. However, just as Mo Hung was about to grab it, a black palm-sized puppet appeared behind him without any warning and slammed into his back. Puff! In an instant, Mo Hung was sent flying. He opened his mouth and spat out a large mouthful of blood. The heart that he hadn't caught firmly fell out of his hand. The puppet patriarch retracted his palm and sneered. Did you think I didn't know you had done something to the heart? He wasn't blind. Mo Hung thought he had done it flawlessly, but the puppet patriarch had still noticed it. He had endured it and kept his guard up against Mo Hung. He had specially prepared a doctrine artifact with a concealment effect, ready to attack Mo Hung at any time. It seemed that the effect was not bad. At the same time, the female ancient sacred drum leaped up and caught the heart with the small cauldron. The puppet patriarch laughed. Well done. With the heart in hand, the next step was to put the heart into the body of the puppet and revive it completely. However, before the puppet patriarch could rejoice, a shocking scene appeared. The female ancient sacred drum didn't hand the small cauldron to him. Instead, she carried the seriously injured Mo Hung, turned around, and rushed out. The puppet patriarch was stunned for a moment. He immediately came to his senses and said in shock and anger, You are Suyu?" The female ancient sacred drum turned around and chuckled. "I've borrowed the heart. You have worked hard to refine it for so many years." Not bad. Her soul had been successfully replaced by Suyu. It turned out that the female ancient sacred drum didn't escape Suyu's pursuit. Her soul had been successfully replaced. Since the female ancient sacred drum had already sent a message, she pretended to be chased by Suyu to gain the trust of the puppet patriarch. The effect of this plan was not bad. The blue hard iron heart was successfully obtained. The puppet patriarch couldn't believe that the body that he had spent many years refining with the Abyss puppet lineage was so easily snatched away by Suyu. Stop right there. The puppet patriarch came to his senses and roared furiously. At the same time, he immediately notified the ancient saints above him. Attack immediately and stop Suyu. Swish! Swish! Several ancient saints not far away were immediately mobilized. They rushed over one after another and attacked in anger. Suyu snorted. Although he didn't have a real body, no one could compete with him in the path of domain, especially the soul domain. Soul-chasing arrow. He opened his eyes wide, and 2 arrows that were almost tangible shot out. In an instant, 2 ancient sages screamed in agony as their souls were obliterated. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he rushed up through the encirclement and went straight to the head of the giant puppet. At this moment, the force of the cauldron also saw the opportunity to attack the puppet. Without anyone controlling the giant puppet, they successfully opened the gate of the Puppet Saint clan and charged in. Cauldron Master. The Netherworld ancestor grabbed Su Yu's body and shouted. Now that Su Yu had replaced his body, no one knew which one was the real Su Yu. Seeing his own body, Su Yu felt relieved. It was time to end this. Chapter 3096. As long as he could control his own body, with the great scythe of calamity and the absolute heaven sword in his hands, as well as his mortal body, no one in the Sangtian Mountain would be a match for him. Swoosh! Su Yu rushed over in the body of the female ancient saint and shouted at the Netherworld ancestor, "Throw my body over here!" The Netherworld ancestor immediately judged from her tone that the female ancient saint in front of him must be Su Yu's soul. He immediately threw her body over. However, the puppet ancestor who was rushing over in mid-air was furious. With a flick of his palm, a chain quickly flew over, wrapped around Su Yu's body, and swept him away. Don't you like to exchange souls? Then continue to exchange them in other bodies. The puppet ancestor grabbed the neck of Su Yu's body and squeezed it hard, making a cracking sound. Su Yu's expression did not change. He turned around to take out the blue heart iron heart and squeezed it. Under the tremendous pressure, the heart was kneaded into a ball and almost shattered. That body is not mine. If you want to destroy it, then destroy it. It doesn't matter, Su Yu said indifferently. What he said was half-truth. The truth was that it really was not his body. It belonged to Prince Mirrorflower. What was false was that the body was still very important and could not be destroyed at will. However, he believed that the blue heart iron heart was more important to the puppet ancestor. It was the blood and sweat of the abyss puppets for generations. If it was destroyed, many years of hard work would go to waste. Don't be stubborn. How can your body not be important? The puppet ancestor said, "You give me back my heart, and I give you my body. Let's call it even. How about that?" Su Yu said indifferently, "No." He squeezed his palm even tighter. "Give me back my body first. As for my heart, I will give it back to you later." Hearing that, the puppet ancestor snorted. "Do you think I am a fool?" Su Yu did not look like a pedantic person. If he really gave him his body, he might keep his promise and return his heart, but it would not be a complete heart. Hand over the body, hand over the heart. There is no other choice. The puppet ancestor shouted. Otherwise, instead of losing both the body and the money, it would be better to destroy your body and get rid of a big problem. Su Yu posed a great threat to him, and if he really had no other choice, he would have to destroy Su Yu's body to get rid of a big problem. The two sides immediately fell into a stalemate. Although the Ding's forces had won one victory after another and occupied the sacred puppet clan's territory step by step, it did not change the stalemate between the two sides. Just as both parties were in a deadlock, Su Yu suddenly felt a slight vibration beneath his feet, like a ripple on the surface of the water. The aftershock spread out in all directions. The puppet race's ancestor was even more sharp. This was the place where the abyss puppet race had lived for generations, so he was even more familiar with it. The abnormal fluctuation caused him to be astonished. Dong! Then, there was another clear movement, as if something was moving, creating a strong wave signal. "What's going on?" The puppet patriarch asked in surprise. Dong, dong, dong. The sound grew louder, clearer, and closer to them. The cauldrons and sacred puppets, fighting on the ground, stopped fighting at the same time and looked down at the ground curiously, their faces full of confusion. Dong, dong, dong. The sound became clearer and clearer, and the puppet patriarch's expression began to become serious. He flew up into the sky and said, "Sacred puppets, leave the ground and leave the puppet." As soon as the order was given, the sacred puppets quickly withdrew from the puppet. Su Yu, who had always been vigilant, was even more so. He immediately ordered, "It turns out to be the sacred puppet clan now." The Cauldron's people also withdrew, and they were very far away from the puppet. Only Su Yu and the two ancestors remained in the sky above the puppet. The puppet patriarch looked down at the giant puppet that he had lived in for many years in shock. At this moment, he could see that the giant puppet was shaking slightly and was slowly sinking. It was as if it could not bear some gradually growing force and was being crushed into the ground. What is that? The puppet patriarch was sure that there must be something coming out from the bottom of the giant puppet. The first person he suspected was undoubtedly Suyu. Human, what have you done? He couldn't believe that there was a force that could make their giant puppet so difficult to bear. What was Suyu doing inside? Suyu stared at the giant puppet below without blinking, and his expression was slightly solemn. You should ask yourself what you just said. He had killed all the way to the puppet patriarch, so how could he have had time to set up other things? There must have been an unexpected upheaval in the giant puppet. Dong, 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 dong. The rapid sound rang out, and the sound was like a war drum beating in everyone's heart. The cauldrons in the distance were fine, but the sacred puppets who had not gone far felt as if their chests were blocked by something. Their hearts were pounding, and it was difficult for them to breathe. They felt uncomfortable all over. Even the puppet patriarch, Qing Mu, and the netherworld patriarch felt extremely depressed. A great sense of crisis shrouded their hearts. The puppet patriarch slowly retreated and said in a stern voice, "Get away from the puppet. Don't get close to it." Qing Mu and the netherworld patriarch also felt a chill in their hearts, and they could not help but retreat. Even Su Yu had to retreat, and his expression became more and more solemn. Although he did not feel as depressed as the three ancestors, chaotic lines of fate began to appear in his chest. Based on his years of experience, the chaotic lines of fate could only appear in front of a powerful enemy. Dong, 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 dong. The sound of footsteps rang out 10 times in a row, as if they were about to leave the puppet. Everyone's hearts were in their throats, and they focused all their attention on the puppet. However, after the 10 footsteps, the sound stopped abruptly, as if it had been cut off. The inside of the puppet returned to peace, and the sky and the earth were all silent. However, the deathly silence did not make them feel at ease. Instead, it made their hearts clench tightly. The Greenwood Saint Clan swallowed hard, and he stared at the puppet's head without blinking. In the blink of an eye, the indestructible head of the puppet suddenly cracked open, and an invisible force swept out with an earth-shattering momentum, aiming at the Greenwood Saint Clan. The Greenwood Saint Clan did not even have time to react, and he was turned into a mist of blood by the finger. His soul also disappeared. A dignified strong man of the Great Saint Clan was crushed by a finger just like that. The Netherworld Patriarch and the Puppet Patriarch were horrified, and they retreated crazily with goosebumps all over their bodies. In the distant scene before their eyes, a light blue figure with chains and seals on his body slowly walked out of the gap. He looked up into the sky, like a god of war looking down on the 9 heavens. Wherever he looked, the sky was burning with layers of raging flames, and fireballs fell from the sky, igniting the mountains, rivers, and earth. In an instant, the world was plunged into a sea of fire. Please remember the original domain name of this book, mobile version website. Chapter 3097. Several masters present stared at the monster that suddenly appeared, and their expressions changed dramatically. The puppet ancestor exclaimed, "The Blue Heart Puppet!" The monster was none other than the Abyss Puppet Clan, a super puppet that had been forged with the skeleton of an all-saint strong man through countless generations of painstaking effort. The Blue Heart Puppet. Old ancestor, the puppet has come back to life. The ancient sages surrounded the old ancestor of the puppet tribe in horror. The Blue Heart Puppet clearly had no heart, and it had not been forged successfully. How could it have its own consciousness? How did it come back to life? In the crowd, Emo Hung said the truth calmly. The consciousness of this group of all saints strong men has never died, and it has always been attached to the skeleton. It deceived the generations of Puppet Saint Clan, and you made its body into the Blue Heart Iron. The Blue Heart Iron was known as indestructible, and any damage could be repaired immediately. This skeleton had been forged into the material of the Blue Heart Iron by the Puppet Saint Clan for countless years, and it had become indestructible. Impossible. Our ancestors have examined it, and this skeleton no longer has any consciousness. The puppet ancestor said in disbelief. They wanted a puppet that could listen to their orders not a living thing with its own consciousness. He could not believe that the puppet Saint clan's tempering for several eras was all for the all-Saint strongman. It was even more difficult to believe that they had been kept in the dark for so many years. Mo Hung said in a low voice, as the Cauldron Master said, "You know nothing about the all-Saint strongmen." No matter what Suyu said, the puppet Saint clan believed in their own judgment too much, but reality slapped them hard in the face. Even a piece of bone of that kind of existence had incredible heavenly power, let alone a whole skeleton. The puppet ancestor felt as if he had been struck by 10,000 lightning bolts, and his mind trembled violently. He was lost for a long time, and it was difficult for him to recover. Even if he got the heart back now, it would be in vain. The puppet had deceived the puppet Saint clan, deceived him, and could not be forgiven. And Mo Hung reminded him, "Puppet ancestor, in my opinion, that consciousness is not strong enough to exert the true strength of the all-Saint skeleton. But if it obtains the heart, it will be a different story." His eyes flickered. In other words, this was the only time he could kill him. The puppet patriarch snapped out of his daze and glared at the blue heart puppet with a vicious glint in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. Since you didn't die, I'll let you die again." In his heart, he added another sentence. Only when his consciousness died would he be able to turn him into a true puppet. As he spoke, the puppet ancestor formed a seal with his hands and said coldly, "Fortunately, I stamped his body with the Buddha's seal." That talisman was a talisman of the Buddha that the puppets had found after rummaging through countless great tombs, and was capable of suppressing all evil entities in the world. This 10,000 saint expert's consciousness hadn't been extinguished for countless eras, which was enough to judge it as an evil being. The puppet patriarch's hands formed a seal, and he shouted, "Suppress." Immediately, the dense Sanskrit runes on the blue heart puppet's body tightened, binding the blue heart puppet in place. The latter's hands and feet immediately closed, and he stood there with his back straight. He could not move at all, and even his head was enveloped by a layer of holy light. The puppet patriarch relaxed and smiled. "It's a success." He glanced at Mo Hung and snorted softly. He had already said that the puppet Saint clan was prepared to restrain the puppets. Mo Hung's worries were groundless. However, both Suyu and Mo Hung kept retreating. Not only did they not heave a sigh of relief, but they became even more solemn. Suyu had come into contact with a first ancestor. The first ancestor, whose abilities were not even at the level of a 10,000 saint, was already terrifyingly powerful. What more the corpse of a real 10,000 saint expert? It was not something that could be suppressed by a worn-out talisman. As expected, not long after the two of them retreated, they heard the sound of something snapping. When they looked, they saw that a thread of Sanskrit runes had snapped. The puppet patriarch's expression changed drastically. He formed another seal, tried to retract the net completely, and restrain the blue heart puppet. However, right at that moment, several snapping sounds rang out continuously. Lines of Sanskrit broke off one after another. From the belly of the blue heart puppet, a gloomy and hoarse voice even sounded. "Even if the Buddha himself were to come, I would still be somewhat wary. Do you think a mere damaged rune can do anything to me?" It had spoken. Moreover, just as Suyu and Mo Hung had expected, the puppet's consciousness had been hidden all along, deceiving the puppet Saint clan to refine its remains. "Break!" With a single word, the tightly bound blue heart puppet slowly raised its arm. The Sanskrit runes on its body shattered in large numbers. When its arm was completely freed, it grabbed all the Sanskrit runes on its body and threw them fiercely. Creak! All the runes on its body were torn apart in an instant. The puppet patriarch's hands, which were forming seals, shook violently and were forcefully shaken away. He was extremely shocked. The talisman had failed. He could not help but retreat, his heart trembling. His eyes began to show fear, and there was an uncontrollable sense of panic in his heart. However, the blue heart puppet did not ignore him just because he retreated. Its eyes, which were filled with dancing flames, shot straight at him. The corners of its mouth formed a line, revealing a human-like mocking smile. As the benefactor who forged my body, I shall gift your entire clan with an opportunity. It raised its palms, clasped them in front of its body, and recited an obscure incantation. Swish! A layer of solid blue crystals rapidly swept in all directions, with it as the center. The blue crystals swept through the rocks, grass, and trees without any abnormalities. However, when they came into contact with the corpses scattered nearby, they immediately turned into blue crystals. This scene was somewhat familiar to Suyu. It was extremely similar to the Blue Heart demonic armor. However, this time, its power was much greater. Seeing this, the puppet patriarch's pupils shrank. Blue Heart wave. He was furious and resentful. As he retreated frantically, he roared, "All members of the Puppet Saint clan, retreat! Retreat!" At this moment, he no longer held any hope for the puppet. The Blue Heart wave was a special attack that the Puppet Saint clan had specially created for the puppet. It could crystallize all living creatures within a 100-mile radius, killing them with a single touch. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that the first time the puppet used it, it would be against the Puppet Saint clan. As for why this was so, the reason was simple. The Blue Heart puppet was created by the Puppet Saint clan, so the one who understood it the most was, of course, the Puppet Saint clan. In order to prevent the Blue Heart puppet from exposing its weaknesses, the first thing it did was to exterminate the Puppet Saint clan that had created it. Looking at the retreating Puppet Saint clan, the Blue Heart puppet laughed sinisterly. It pointed its finger in the air, and the Blue Heart wave swept out at an even more astonishing speed. In the vicinity, only the members of the Puppet Saint clan had not escaped far. As they fled in terror, they were immediately swept by the wave. In an instant, they collectively turned into blue crystals, which then fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. Even the puppet patriarch, who had the highest cultivation, had half of his body crystallized. 8:00 p.m. Please remember this book's original domain name. Mobile version website. Chapter 3098. In the blink of an eye, the Puppet Saint clan was almost wiped out. Only the puppet ancestor was left, and he was only half dead. All of this was caused by a single attack from the Blue Heart puppet. Witnessing this scene with his own eyes, Suyu's expression was calm, his heart unmoved. They had brought this upon themselves, and they could not blame anyone else. Both he and Mo Hung had reminded them time and time again not to underestimate the remains of the 10,000 saints experts. However, from the patriarch of the puppets to the ordinary members of the clan, they were all so full of themselves that they had no idea that they were doing something that could endanger the entire clan and the entire world. In the end, there was something wrong with the Blue Heart puppet, and the first thing it did after it was born was to destroy the Puppet Saint clan. The puppet ancestor looked at the ground littered with the crystallized corpses of his clansmen and screamed in despair. Blue Heart, clang, puppet. Unfortunately, his screams could not change the situation. Everything was in vain. The Blue Heart puppet looked over disdainfully and bent its finger toward the puppet ancestor, preparing to flick its finger. With the puppet ancestor's current state of half-crystallization, a flick of its finger could kill him. Clang! With a flick of its finger, a sharp blue wave of light shot toward the puppet ancestor's back. At this moment, the puppet patriarch was only half dead. How could he resist the Blue Heart puppet's attack? His eyes were filled with despair and regret. If he had known this would happen, he would not have done it in the first place. If he had listened to Suyu and Mo Hang's advice, he would not have ended up like this. It was too late to say anything now. However, just as the blue wave of light was about to reach him, a blue palm suddenly appeared in front of the puppet ancestor without warning, blocking it. It was none other than Suyu. In the distance, Mo Hung was startled, looking at Suyu in confusion. Cauldron Zun, come back quickly. The Blue Heart puppet was so terrifying, but Suyu had actually taken the initiative to attract its attention, and for the sake of the puppet ancestor, to be honest, he felt that the puppet ancestor deserved to die and should not have been saved. Suyu's expression was calm. He released his palm, and the blue wave of light that shot toward him was crushed into dust by his blue-gloved hand. Without the lips, the teeth will feel the cold. Our current enemy is the blue heart puppet, Suyu said calmly. Although the puppet ancestor was the culprit, their top priority now was not to settle who was responsible, but to eliminate the enemy in front of them together. He turned around to glance at the puppet tribe's ancestor and said, "Do you want to avenge your clansmen?" The puppet patriarch had just narrowly escaped death, and his rough face was replaced by grief and indignation. "Human, don't try to provoke me. I know what you want to say. From now on, I'm on your side until this puppet is destroyed." Suyu nodded. That would be for the best. All of a sudden, the internal blood energy channels in Suyu's body started to vibrate rhythmically, as if something was controlling them. He glanced sideways and keenly noticed that the puppet patriarch's lips were moving slightly. Suyu rolled his eyes and calmed his heart to listen to the beating of the meridians. He gradually understood that this was some secret technique of the abyss puppet that stimulated the meridians of others to beat. His original intention was to impart a legacy that only certain meridians could withstand, but at this moment, he was passing on some words. "Cover me as I enter the puppet. With this puppet, we might be able to destroy this blue heart puppet." The puppet patriarch told Suyu in such a peculiar way of transmitting words. They were facing the blue heart puppet of the All Saints level. Even soul transmission could be detected by the other party, and their intentions could be seen through. Therefore, they could only use this special method of transmission. Suyu nodded lightly without batting an eyelid. He raised his hand, and the blue heart demonic armor on his body completely covered his body. Facing the skeleton of the All Saints of the past, Suyu did not dare to be careless. With the blue heart demonic armor on his body, Suyu took out the absolute heaven sword. With the sword in hand, a peerlessly fierce light burst forth. At the same time, an oil lamp floated above Suyu's head, flickering with flickering waves of light. That was the power of the saint body. Moreover, with a wave of his left hand, the great scythe of 10,000 calamity appeared. The chaotic energy in his body surged wildly into it, urging it to the extreme. Facing it, Suyu was fully armed and prepared. "You have some assets." The blue heart puppet looked at Suyu from afar and laughed hoarsely. "Even in my era, the things you have on you are considered decent top-notch items. It's a pity that it's a waste to use them on you," the blue heart puppet said. "Why don't you let me have them?" It opened its mouth and spat at Suyu abruptly. A bolt of blue lightning pierced through the space and directly passed through Suyu's body. The heart of the puppet's ancestor, who was watching the battle from afar, sank. Suyu, the strongest of the Sangtian Mountain, was finished just like that. They were all finished. There was no hope for anything. However, the blue heart puppet's eyes narrowed, and it said indifferently, "The domain of time and space? That's a little surprising." "Huh." Everyone immediately looked up. Suyu, who was reflected in their eyes, turned into a phantom and dissipated. The blue heart puppet suddenly turned around and raised its palm to strike the void behind it. There, Suyu's imposing posture appeared without warning. From above, a sword and a scimitar slashed down at the same time. Clang! The sword and scimitar struck the palm of the blue heart puppet, but they did not cut it in the slightest. Only sparks were produced on its palm. Suyu's heart trembled violently. He had used 70% of his strength, but he could not even scratch the skin of his opponent. Wasn't the blue heart puppet a little too powerful? At that moment, its meridians throbbed again. It was the anxious voice of the puppet's ancestor. It has two weaknesses. One is in the chest, where the heart has not been embedded, and the other is under the armpit. Suyu could not help but be annoyed. Why didn't it say so earlier? At that moment, he could only retreat temporarily. But the blue heart puppet had countless eras of combat experience, and it was once a true all-saint strongman. How could it miss such a fleeting opportunity to strike? The palm that was blocking the sword and scimitar suddenly erupted with an incomparably rich blue light beam. The light beam came into contact with the air and immediately materialized. It was like a wooden stick that extended infinitely, and it stabbed towards Suyu's head fiercely. But Suyu's combat experience was just as rich. Before his opponent struck, he had already anticipated its attack. Immediately, a remnant mark was drawn in the air. The ancestral soul technique appeared immediately, and in an instant, a dense fog was condensed in front of the blue heart puppet. Although the body of the blue heart puppet was strong, it had a fatal weakness. That was, its consciousness was not at the level of all saints. Its consciousness was at most 1/10,000th of that of a true all-saint strongman. Suyu's ancestral soul technique still had an effect on it. As expected, the blue heart puppet immediately lost its target. A hint of surprise finally appeared in its indifferent tone. Ancestral soul technique? Who are you? If it was just the area of time and space, he could understand. After all, the marriage between the people of the two great areas might produce offspring who could be proficient in both areas. But how could this person be proficient in even the ancestral soul technique? If he remembered correctly, the complete ancestral soul technique had long been lost due to the plotting of the Saint Mountain's Emperor. There is one more chapter to be updated tomorrow morning. Please remember this book's original domain name. Mobile version website.